This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people have so much to gain and have such an ulterior motive for putting me in a position I'm in. We'll never let the true facts come above board to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader? Don't remember his name. You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
Now these people are in very high positions, Jack. Yes.
Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 268. I'm your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khalid.
And today, we're finally back after a few months with another installment of the Grotto of Truth Q&A series.
Yeah, has been a while since we've done this.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like we've done a little more call-in action in between, so haven't been totally neglecting the Grotto here. But we thought it would be good today to get back to the original database of Grotto
it's an SJ
questions.
staple. Mm-hmm. And that's, we felt that it was in the spirit of something we're planning in a couple of days on Thursday, the 2nd.
That's right. Spooky season is on.
Spooky season is on. And we will be taking the opportunity to celebrate SJ's 5-year anniversary. Something that we've been meaning to do for a while. I don't know how well this quite matches up with the actual 5-year anniversary, but we're gonna celebrate. So we're gonna be doing something similar, kind of a live thing with some call-ins.
With some call-ins.
It
will be a special experience. We're gonna have some special guests, some fellow old heads that probably a lot of you are familiar with from their own podcasts and posting careers. Some of our favorite comrades in the Noited Struggle are going to be joining us, I think in succession for a long public broadcast on Thursday, probably starting hopefully about noon Pacific time, I think. Somewhere around there.
I think so.
Yeah. But we've already got an exciting lineup so far, and I think we might add a couple more names to it. So stay tuned to our socials to find more info out about that.
Yes, but for now, let's get into these
we're doing the
questions.
classic.
Making our way through. Yeah, this is something that is a feature of the podcast from the very beginning. But it wasn't too long until we did this first Grotto Q&A. When I was searching for this, in our work flowy, I came upon the first little tab we made for a Discord Q&A. But it wasn't dated. So, but it's been a while since we've been doing these, and we take so long to answer his question that we're significantly behind. And the questions are not recent. But we often find that answering the old questions is interesting, and seeing how because sometimes if they do have a topical dimension, it's interesting how that issue has evolved in the 3 years or so since we're gonna be answering some questions from 2022. I think we curated them. We haven't gone strictly in order, so apologies to anyone who we skipped. We will get to you, but we wanted to, since it is spooky season. And I feel like we're kind of a spooky podcast, but we often kind of have in the past sometimes failed to take advantage of the spooky season. Mm-hmm. We're gonna try to do some spooky things this month, in that vein. So I thought let's try to do some particularly spooky questions for the Q&A.
And we have some good ones. I think I sort of strafed through further deep into 2022, which is where we had left off, and I think I might have gotten as far as July or August 2022 with a couple of these questions. I do feel like the density is kind of lessening. So once we get through our core 2022 ones, in I guess the next probably the next couple Q&A ones, that we do, will finally be in 2023, which is a funny year to think about.
Yeah.
I don't really think much about most of 2023. I guess it all feels so long ago, but it only it only livens up some of these questions.
Yeah. Why is 2023 interesting to think about rather than 2022? Or
well, I don't know. You would think it was closer, and yet it still feels like so far away in this kind of Biden interregnum. And of course, I feel like the year got a huge vibe shift near the end with October 7th. But before that, it was, the Ukraine war was still kind of dragging on. It wasn't clear yet to what extent Trump was going to come back or not, right? Remember, there were like Republicans, kind of trying to run against him. And
that's interesting. Yeah, that's weird to remember. Yeah, I remember thinking maybe they won't, elect Trump in the primary. Like maybe there will be some kind of weird curveball. I remember Alex Jones kind of endorsing Ron DeSantis.
Right.
Yeah.
And most of the year, I think up through the midterms of 2022, there had been speculation that Biden wouldn't make it maybe to 2024. But then after the smashing success in those midterms, most of 2023 was like, oh, nope, he's running. Crazy Joe did it again.
He gave him the State of the Union juice and everything. And,
Yeah. So, we'll get there soon enough. But today we've curated some very good spooky queries from the Grotto Discord server. So let's see.
Yeah, this first one is from Broke Down Jumper.
Right.
I guess I'll read this one.
Sure.
What is the deal with the Lucis Trust and the United Nations? It is very difficult to find much reliable information about them and the nature of the relationship between the Lucis Trust and the UN, but clearly something sus is going on. Founded by Alice Bailey and her husband, Freemasons, of course. Was Alice Bailey a Freemason?
She was a theosophist.
Yeah, I wasn't sure that she was a Freemason. Maybe she moved through Freemasonry at some point that I'm not familiar with. But yeah, she was definitely a big theosophist. I don't know, how, again, theosophical thought. Well, anyway, we'll talk about it a little bit. The trust was originally called Lucifer Publishing. I have not personally read Bailey's writings, but I know she's part of the greater Blavatsky milieu. That's a good way to describe her, definitely.
Yeah. So I first came upon this years and years ago. I feel like, I don't even know what documentary, maybe this was in, oh my God, what was that movie, Zeitgeist or something, like the 2000s kind of sort of conspiracy, Alex Jones adjacent.
Right. Yeah.
I definitely stumbled across this. I remember looking it up in the very early 2010s and being like, that is kind of weird. Lucifer Publishing Company becomes Lucis Trust and then is affiliated with the UN. How did that happen? It's not much information is kind of available beyond that. But I did always clock it as something a little odd. And then I feel like since we've been doing SJ, my awareness of theosophy and its great influence has grown a lot, and I have a better understanding of it. So maybe I'm not as surprised as maybe I would have been, years ago, that somehow a theosophical org wormed its way into some branch of the UN or something and renamed itself. Yeah. But Broke Down Jumper is correct. This was, I think we've mentioned it in other episodes, talking about theosophy, Lucifer magazine, right? Wasn't that basically the leading theosophical magazine back in the 1920s?
Yeah, it was. I don't know if it was the leading, but it was the journal that Blavatsky published. So I assume, I don't know.
Now, actually,
by the time,
maybe I have to catch myself because the Wikipedia blurb about Lucis Trust says that it was created in 1922, and it was it was like a publishing company, so it might have been inspired by the name of Lucifer Magazine, but wasn't like literally Lucifer Magazine.
No, it was originally Lucis Trust. It was originally called the Lucifer Publishing Company. Lucifer Magazine was a separate thing, and that's why, I'm not sure if Lucifer Magazine actually was still in circulation, because Alice Bailey came a little bit later.
Right.
I think that like Blavatsky probably like died when Alice Bailey was she died in 1891, and Alice Bailey was like 10 at that time. So like she was like of a later generation.
She was a later generation. Okay, I'm seeing right here that the Lucifer Magazine journal, it's basically a journal that Blavatsky published in, and let's see, it did kind of, I think, Annie Besant was the co-editor of it, and then George Robert Stowe Mead became a co-editor in 1895, and let's see, when did it stop being in 1897 it was renamed to Day: The Theosophical Review, and okay, and then in 2013 the English version of the magazine was resurrected, but I'm not seeing like a termination date of like when did the original one. I mean, I guess it changed its name in 1897. So yeah, but there's definitely like an inspiration of for Alice Bailey was a huge theosophist, and obviously was like huge very much to Madame Blavatsky's writings, and she wrote the Ageless Wisdom. So I guess it's really from her kind of maybe more direct influence that we should look to see like how did this end up in the UN.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's pretty. It kind of makes sense in a way, because like the idea of like United Nations, like it does kind of have this like very like new age you can definitely take it like in that direction if you like when the United Nations was a new idea, like which was like when this became like part of the UN like Social and Economic Council, I think is like technically like what its participation is. I'm not like exactly sure like what like role it even has like in the UN Social and Economic Council, but the
Sustainable Development Council, right? Or
the
you might be right. It's they talk about the Sustainable Development Goals are basically like the project that Lucis Trust is sort of concerned with, and they did have a blog for a while that would talk mostly about the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, which, are like kind of about, sustainable development, combating climate change, ocean preservation, etc., connected to, let's see. The World Goodwill, which is part of the Lucis Trust, is on the roster of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. World Goodwill is an approved non-governmental organization, or NGO, with the UN's Department of Public Information. It is dedicated to solving the world's problems through a new perception of humanity as a unit of divine life within an ordered and purposive universe. It is based on the New Age idea that man is divine, which is actually Satan's ancient lie to Eve, ye shall be as gods. Okay, I realize I'm reading this from Way of Life Bible College, but I believe that everything, up to that point, we can take to be, I think that actually is true. I'm sure that comes from, you probably find verification on Wikipedia as well. But anyway, but yeah, like, so I'm not even like, but what is unclear to me is like, what, if any, like, power or like, real role that gives them other than like some kind of like affiliation. But I mean, they talk like they have like a website still operates, and they explain like their evolution. It was established by Allison Foster Bailey as a vehicle to foster recognition of the universal spiritual principles at the heart of all work to build right relations. The trust was incorporated in the state of New Jersey, USA on April 5th, 1922. A separate limited company, Lucis Trust Limited, was established as an educational charity and incorporated in the United Kingdom in 1935. And in 1951, Lucis Trust was established as a legal entity in Switzerland with an office in Geneva. A publishing company, initially named Lucifer Publishing Company, was established by Allison Foster Bailey in the state of New Jersey, USA, in May 1922 to publish the book Initiation, Human, and Solar.
The ancient myth of Lucifer refers to the angel who brought light to the world, and it is assumed that this name was applied to the publishing company in honor of a journal which had been edited for a number of years by the Theosophical founder, H.P. Blavatsky. It soon became clear to the Baileys, that some Christian groups have traditionally mistaken Lucifer with Satan. It's pretty funny that like that became clear later on. Like, oh, what? Like that name has a negative connotation to certain Christians traditionally. And for this reason, the company's name was changed in 1924 to Lucis Publishing Company. The Arcane School started in 1923. World Goodwill was established in 1932, and Triangles in 1937. Over the years, headquarters offices in New York, London, and Geneva have moved locations a number of times. New York office is located in a building overlooking the United Nations. In London, the office is close to Trafalgar Square and one of the city's most architecturally distinctive buildings, Whitehall Court. And after many years in a building close to the United Nations, the Geneva headquarters is now located on Rue Stand in the business district close to the lake. I feel like I remember reading that like it was in 666 United Nations Plaza, but I don't know if that's true. I could see sure. I could see maybe that being true, like, you know, because again, like they kind of like it's not like they're not saying that they're evil. They like reinterpret the meaning of like these
they
symbols,
step back from the full Lucifer branding.
Of course, you know, it's like, well, but still.
But I found a little more information on Alice Bailey's Wikipedia about Lucis Trust, about the triangles, and it says that she founded, you know, the Arcane School, World Goodwill, Triangles, a quarterly magazine called The Beacon, and a publishing company. The Arcane School gives instruction and guidance in meditation via correspondence based on the ideas in Bailey's books. World Goodwill is intended to promote better human relations through goodwill, which they define as, quote, love in action. That action included the support of the United Nations. The, quote, triangles are groups of 3 people who agree to link up in thought each day and to meditate on right human relations, visualizing light and love pouring into human minds and hearts, followed by the use of the great invocation. Wow. It is not necessary for each person to link in thought at the same time each day, and it only takes a few moments of time. Allison Foster Bailey founded Lucifer Publishing Company, etc., and she continued this work up to her death in 1949. Okay, so it's a kind of meditation, like this triangular group meditation thing. I also did notice right below that, under Alice Bailey, main ideas, the 7 rays of energy. No. Bailey's writings include a detailed exposition of the 7 rays, which are presented as the fundamental energies that are behind and exist throughout all manifestation. They are seen as the basic creative forces of the universe and emanations of divinity that underlie the evolution of all things. The rays are described as related to human psychology, the destiny of nations, as well as the planets and stars of the heavens. The concept of the 7 rays can be found in theosophical works and the speeches of General Michael Flynn. No. Okay. So she was a big 7 ray head. Interesting.
I mean, that's like an even older occult idea. In fact, the whole idea of like the rainbow is having like 7 colors in it. Like that's like basically like, you know, of course, like they kind of shade into each other, but like, you know, if you ever seen a rainbow, like you can kind of tell that like the whole like distinction between indigo and violet, maybe you disagree, maybe you see it, but like it's not like really like there, but like Isaac
you're
Newton,
saying this
is
like a psyop
most
like,
of
to
Isaac
make us think that it's like a Lucky Charms rainbow with like 7 clearly identifiable primary kind of colors, right? When in fact,
well, I don't know if you call them primary colors. I guess they're like wavelengths of light is what you call them now. But like most of Isaac Newton's like intellectual career was all about like occultism and like mysticism. You know, it wasn't really about like physics, like primarily. He was mostly into like, you know, the occult and that type of thing. And so when he was like talking about color theory, he like, you know, wanted the 7th color, like the rainbow to have 7 colors because like, you know, 7 is a significant number, you know, or a meaningful number. That's
interesting.
Yeah, I'm not looking it up to verify that currently, but I believe, you know, that he was like the innovator of Roy G. Biv.
Roy G. Biv. Okay. Yeah.
Which you probably, you know.
I think I'm curious.
In the Renaissance, several artists tried to establish a sequence of up to 7 primary colors from which all other colors could be mixed. In line with his artistic tradition, Sir Isaac Newton divided his color circle, which he constructed to explain additive color mixing, into 7 colors.
Interesting.
Right. Originally, he used only 5 colors, but later he added orange and indigo to match the number of musical notes in the major scale. What that is emitting is the occult significance of 7. And I believe that, having read
Good
that
point.
fact, yeah.
Right.
And I believe that, that was a quick look up, if you look into it further, you can verify. But anyway, back to the Lucis Trust. So I figured out, this is a little bit, difficult to unpack. And for people who are watching, we're kind of figuring this out as we go, because sometimes with the Q&A, we don't have time to go deep into every question, but, beforehand, that is. But so I think that, according to, based on what their website says, which I am inclined to think probably is close to the truth, their association with the, United Nations, that they're a recognized non-governmental organization, by the Department of Global Communications, which, of course, as I say, part of a community of many hundreds of NGOs that play an active role in the United Nations.
Right.
And they
there
have a consultative
of
status,
organizations, I wouldn't be surprised, the... B'nai B'rith or something had some kind of NGO that was affiliated with, or various kind of groups that have, this one just has a particularly, new agey kind of orientation to it. But there are, this is, it's a little different than kind of being a department of the United Nations or something like
exactly.
that.
It's not
an affiliate thing, basically.
It's
they do things like pray the Great Invocation after 9/11 as part of a network of light meditations for peace. That's what the Findhorn Foundation did. They use this great invocation that was a mantra given in 1937 by Alice Bailey, which begins with, "From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men," with the rest of the passage expressing the ideas of love, the return of the Christ, Maitreya, and of men acting in accordance with the plan of God. So they do a lot of group meditations where they all recite the great invocation.
They have kind of a little piece here on the that is the world goodwill. They have this kind of piece on the significance of the United Nations. Imagine a child asks you, "What does the UN do?" It's a simple question, and to answer it, you might search the internet for news stories involving the UN. A couple hours later, you might say to the child, "Well, when it comes to important things that matter for people everywhere, there isn't much the UN does not do." Most people are familiar with hearing about the UN's involvement in urgent humanitarian crises such as the refugee situation in Syria and the surrounding countries. Many would also know that the UN is simultaneously involved in the political side of this crisis, trying to bring parties together to end armed conflict. But away from the spotlight of immediate crises, the UN is involved in many other less newsworthy aid situations. 2 recent examples are in the Kachin state of Burma and the Seleka area in the Central African Republic. And I hope I'm saying those 2 things right, but I'm not sure that I am. And the UN is likewise involved in many other conflicts, whether they are currently active or are in temporary ceasefire. Even less reported is the work of the UN and its agencies in other areas: international tax reform, meteorological cooperation, international air navigation, scientific, educational, and cultural cooperation, and the list goes on. At that point, our imaginary child might say, "Why does it do so many things? What is the UN for?" Answering this question leads us to examine the UN Charter. The preamble of the Charter is perhaps the most stirring and ambitious mission statement of any organization, and it is worth quoting and taking time to ponder. "We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined, point 1, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and, point 2, to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women of nations large and small, and, point 3, to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and, point 4, to promote social progress and better standards of life and larger freedom. And for these ends, 5, to practice tolerance and live together in peace and one another as good neighbors, and in peace with one another as good neighbors, and to unite our strength and to maintain international peace and security, and to ensure by the acceptance of principles and the institution of methods that armed force shall not be used save in the common interest, and finally, to employ international machinery for the promotion of economic and social advancement of all peoples. And we have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims. Accordingly, our respective governments do hereby establish an international organization to be known as the United Nations. And then, they kind of start waxing on this, saving the future from war, ellipsis, reaffirming faith in human rights, ellipsis, establishing respect for international law, ellipsis, promoting social progress, ellipsis. Any one of these tasks is world-changing in its scope, and the UN seeks to accomplish all four. And all this on a budget that is a mere fraction of the annual GDP of even quite small nations. The scale of the UN's work explains why it is involved, indeed has to be involved, in so many areas of international cooperation. And implicit in all these goals is the fact that, while there are many nations and cultures across the world, there is one humanity. Of all the agencies, processes, and programs of the UN, they exist purely to work out all the concrete implications of this fact. And the very name of the organization, containing both nations, implying division, and united, implying wholeness, reveals the dynamic creative tension which lies at the heart of the UN's very existence. So you can kind of start to see how this is like a sort of spiritualization or like an esoteric interpretation of the meaning of the UN. And it kind of makes sense in a way because if you think about it, the thing about New Age, broadly speaking, organizations that, they believe in the idea of a new age, they're sort of fundamentally progressive in a way that a lot of older religions tend to be conservative or resistant to change. New age groups rush towards change and new things because they are all about the advent of this new age.
It's right in the name.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's right in the name. So in that respect, it kind of makes sense that a group like Lucis Trust, based on the ideas of theosophy, would kind of rush to embrace the idea of the UN, and to be involved from very early on, to not only out of a sense of obligation or a sense of not wanting to be left out, but with true eagerness, which maybe has contributed to the strong association of the two.
Let's not forget that it's sort of fallen off in more recent years, but in the 90s, for example, the UN was such a bugbear of right-wing conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
They were going to be the executors of, that was the flag that the New World Order was going to fly, when it unleashed its forces around the globe. And but at the same time, the UN, it would be great to do an actual deep dive on the foundation of the United Nations one day. It was founded where else? San Francisco, right? I think in 1945 or 46, right? Right at the end of the war.
It definitely was right at the end of World War II. But I'm not sure.
Almost positive. In fact, now I could be wrong, but I think I remember seeing something recently that alleged that.
Yeah, there was planning before, but the first UN conference on international organization opened in San Francisco.
Yes, yeah. And then I think they decided to move it to New York for its permanent home and build that, the big place they have it today. But I think they considered, at least for a little while, of building the headquarters in San Francisco. And I think they looked at actually building the UN headquarters on the Presidio Army base.
Wow.
Which is interesting. It's had a lot of interesting residents and owners over the years. And that the kind of, American elites were deeply, deeply involved, the Rockefellers and other types of people, a lot of Wilsonian liberal, determined interventionist types were heavily involved in setting up, your Avril Harrimans, people like that were setting it up. And it was still in the tail end of that period when the Soviet Union and the U.S. were allies. So they worked out this Security Council kind of arrangement where basically the winners of World War II get to veto anything military that the UN would do, right? And but at the same time, it feels I don't know. I feel if I was Joseph Stalin, I'd probably feel the deck was a little bit stacked against me from the beginning at the UN. It's based in the United States. It's not. like even, you know, other international organizations, I don't know, like The Hague or something like that, you know, they're kind of put in like a small, more like neutral seeming country. But like the fact that it's in the US feels like, you know, you're on one person's home turf, like this, the driving forces and funders of like building this institution are heavily like American.
Yeah,
Who
in fact,
are on a certain side.
I just read the reason why it was built in New York is because John D. Rockefeller provided the funding for the purchase.
There you go. I mean, the man who bought the land that it's built on is a Rockefeller, you know, so like I always felt like they were going to be a little bit, you know, maybe a little bit biased towards the global south and towards the socialists.
As we talked about, like in The Land Belongs to Whom It Belongs, like the whole, like the League of Nations and like that, like whole, you know, it was all Woodrow Wilson's brainchild. The United Nations kind of a development of that. League of Nations kind of like failed, obviously. You know, not that the UN has succeeded at its the goals that we just read in that charter particularly well, but you know, it the League of Nations disintegrated. But yeah, so it's like really kind of like a U.S. project ultimately. So
it is, and I think it also, because it does, you know, include representatives from all around the world. Like it's inevitably not always going to, you know, like anti-American sentiments are going to be, you know, aired at these like, you know, General Assembly meetings. And, you know, there are going to be resolutions passed often, like there have been against Israel, you know, for many years that always get vetoed by the U.S. But it seems almost like a place that you can kind of, like a containment institution to contain like the utopian hopes of like people towards like a better world where there's no more conflict and everybody can mediate everything. Like, you know, I think people are, I think for somewhat understandably, like, you know, they're reluctant to, you know, kind of be like, fuck the UN, like get rid of it, because it's like as flawed and ineffectual as it is, it's kind of at this point the only thing representing like a truly like universalist project of like the nations, like peacefully working out their differences and cooperating towards a better world. And, you know, with the exception of maybe like some of the climate stuff that was pursued in like the 2010s. But even that, I'm not sure, you know, a lot of that was like multilateral treaties, right? Like the Paris Climate Accords. They weren't necessarily done like, you know, within the UN or something like that. You know, I mean, I get to see like, I'm saying I'm sussed out by the UN, but also like I could only imagine things being worse in the immediate term if it were to like totally collapse like the League of Nations did, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that, yeah, it does seem like kind of the U.S. still possesses like power to basically like veto everything that the UN could potentially do about the situation in Gaza. Not that they, you know, can't do other things in other areas, but it seems like ultimately like their ability to like advance like general human justice is limited by like their inability to do anything about like injustice that is perpetrated by the United States. So that's like a big like, so in that respect, like it's kind of disillusioning because it's like, well, okay, like I guess like you may like do some good in the world, but like ultimately like it kind of you know, you can't really stand up to empire, and in fact like are a factor of it in like many cases, you know, or a like a functionary of it or function of it.
Right. But, it's like it's a critical aspect of America's somewhat opaque like method of imperial control over, you know, most of the world, is that it can kind of, you know, it can provide this kind of pseudo-democratic forum for like the airing of grievances and votes on things, and like people can busy themselves with activity. But like at the end of the day, the US can come in and be like, no, like, you know, but it gives people like the hope that, you know, as opposed to a more direct system of like domination that is like, you know, we don't give a fuck what you think, like, you know, we're like, you're just going to take orders from us, kind of how like the Trump administration is acting right now. That's kind of, it's a little more of an aberrant mode of acting than the more classical Wilsonian one that is a little more reserved and like we trust in our robust institutions, but they know they're like kind of rigged. So, you know, and of course, I mean, like the World Bank and the IMF are to some extent connected to the UN. It's always a little vague, like these institutions, like I mean, they're also, I think, in a large degree, kind of constructed by the same architects, and they serve, they've served some pretty nefarious, like, neo-colonial purposes, particularly the IMF, and kind of getting people into, like, debt peonage. But I do see one other interesting connection between the UN and, like, Theosophists, which is the Findhorn Foundation that I mentioned. It's a Scottish charitable trust registered in 1972, which it features the Findhorn Eco Village in Scotland, one of the largest intentional communities in Britain. And so this is founded by people like Eileen Caddy, Peter Caddy, and Dorothy McLean in the early 70s. And they have been awarded the UN Habitat Best Practice designation from the UN Center for Human Settlements, Habitat, and they regularly hold seminars of Seafall Findhorn, a United Nations Institute for Training and Research, an affiliated training center for Northern Europe. So this is basically like a theosophy group that's like actively involved in kind of like various offshoot kind of UN programs and stuff. But listen to this about like actually the origins of this group just at first glance are sending my radar off. In the late 1940s, Sheena Govan emerged as an informal spiritual teacher to the small circle that included her then husband Peter Caddy and Dorothy McLean. Eileen Caddy, as she became, who had a background in the moral rearmament movement, joined them in the early 50s. The group's principal focus was dedication to the Christ within and following God's guidance. In 1957, Peter and Eileen Caddy were appointed to manage the Cluny Hill Hotel near Forres, McLean joining them as the hotel secretary. Though now separated from Sheena Govan, whose relationship with Eileen Caddy had deteriorated, they continued with the practices she taught. In the early 60s, Caddy, along with others who called themselves channelers, believed that they were in contact with extraterrestrials through telepathy and prepared a landing strip for flying saucers at nearby Cluny Hill. So this is like a Theosophist UFO like cult, it's sounding like. Yeah. But going on, in late 1962, Caddy's employment with the hotel chain that owned Cluny Hill, at the time he was working in the Trossachs, was terminated. He and Eileen settled in a caravan near the village of Findhorn. An annex was built in early 1963 so that McLean could live close to the Caddy family. Eileen Caddy's direct relationship with God began with an experience in Glastonbury, home of the famous rock festival, where she recorded that she heard a voice say, "Be still and know that I am God." Peter Caddy followed, quote, an intuitive, spontaneous inner knowing and was influenced by Theosophy and MRA, the moral rearmament movement, from which he developed methods of positive thinking and other methods he had learned in the Rosicrucian Order Crotona Fellowship. Interesting. I hadn't heard of that exact group. But they're, Rosicrucian offshoot. McLean initially followed practices from the Sufi group centered on the teachings of Inayat Khan, and from this developed her contact with the divine to focus on communication with nature spirits, which she named as devas. The three of them agreed that McLean's contacts should be made useful for the growing of food, which was supplementing their income. The Caddies credited the garden's success of producing exceptionally large vegetables on these practices. Interesting. Many others were involved with varying importance and influences in the early years, from Lena Lamont, part of Sheena Govan's circle, who lived in her caravan with her family and who shunned publicity, to those who Peter Caddy met as he traveled in British New Age circles, among them Robert Ogilvie Crombie, ROC. I don't know what that is. Is that a Rosicrucian or is that a knighthood title?
Not sure. It?
ROC. ROC. Oh, no, I guess that's his initials. Robert Ogilvie Crombie. Right. Yeah, who wrote of nature spirits in the Findhorn Garden. Sir George Trevelyan, who formed the Wrekin Trust. Anthony Walter Dayrell Brooke, etc. Through connections such as these and the distribution of Eileen Caddy's writings in the form of a booklet titled God Spoke to Me, people came to live at the caravan park, eventually forming the Findhorn Trust and the Findhorn Community. Wow. So, I mean, this is like a theosophist moral rearmament hybrid sort of cult that nonetheless like partners with the United Nations and does training, I guess. They do seminars for Seafall, I don't know. Yeah, this is the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. It serves as a platform for capacity building of government authorities and civil society leaders on topics related to sustainable development as well as global mandates and the goals of the United Nations. It's funny to have like this group doing that. I don't know. Like it's just that's kind of interesting.
Well, it kind of goes to the point. Like, someone was they don't have a name. Very mysterious. An anonymous user posted in the live chat, like, what do you guys think externalization of the hierarchy is? I couldn't tell if this was like, well, what do you think this is? Or it was like, what do you guys think it is? But like, I like read it like, okay, well, maybe they're kind of implying that the UN is kind of an externalization or like part of like how Alice Bailey would envision the externalization of like the hierarchy of like occult masters, which is like a part of like theosophical and like more broadly like New Age teaching. Like, that's definitely like an idea that like Claire Prophet like dabbled in if we're talking about the sevenfold ring, like things like that. Not that she's like the the biggest proponent of that. I mean, she is a big proponent, but not like she's the leading proponent of it. There's many like the I Am movement more broadly. That's a big part of it. This whole idea of like a like hidden or ascended. Really, it's like a very very old idea, but especially in the New Age. But like the externalization of the hierarchy is the idea that you do see like in Alice Bailey's treatise of the sevenfold rays, but also like her text that's called externalization of the hierarchy, where she talks about how like the ascended masters like ashrams. Let me see if I can find like let me see if I can look that up and like find like a key part of that. I like the poem that it opens with, the externalization of the hierarchy, because there's a good part here that's kind of like like I mean, this might be a good example, because I think that like if what that anonymous person is implying is that I don't even know if it was supposed to be like a rhetorical question, but like either way, like if we consider the idea that like the United Nations could play a role, it could be conceived as something that would play a role in the externalization of the hierarchy. I think that actually is exactly right. Like, does it actually like have like a significant occult dimension? Like, that's like to be, I guess, like, that's like maybe neither, or we can leave that aside for now, but like certainly in the minds of like the loosest trust people, like absolutely, definitely. Like, so this is like from their text, the externalization of the hierarchy. The work to be done, again, this is like in the middle of the thing, by the fifth group of disciples is by far the most difficult, if any, for it is in many ways less advanced. This is due to two facts. One, the masses of men are, as yet, relatively so little evolved. The task of this group of workers must therefore necessarily be dependent upon the success of the educational work of the world, as it will eventually be exemplified by the ideals and point of view of the fourth group and similar groups everywhere. Again, this is the middle of a thing, but I'm getting to the relevant part in a second. So few truly first-ray people are manifesting on the planet at this time, and when they do, their work perforce proves destructive, owing to the unevolved condition of the masses of men. That is why revolutions so seldom, if ever, can be carried out without bloodshed, for the intended ideas have to be imposed upon the masses and are not immediately recognized and adopted by those masses. This text, I should say, is like from like the late 30s. I think like the it was like March 1934. It opens with kind of an address in March 1934.
Okay.
But anyway, like the masses of men are, as yet. I think that maybe parts of it were written later though. But so it's maybe straddling those periods. But anyway, this is why revolution so seldom can be carried without full bloodshed, for the intended ideas had to be imposed upon the masses, and they're not recognized and adopted. Let it not be forgotten that the objective of all true governmental control is right synthesis, leading to right national and interior group activity. The problem resolves itself into a dual one. First of all, we have the problem of the type of authority which should be recognized by the peoples. And secondly, we have the problem of the methods which should be employed, so that the chosen authoritative measures will proceed either by the method of enforced control, or would be of such a nature that they will evoke a generously rendered and recognized cooperation. Between these two ways of working, many changes can be wrung, though the system of cooperation, willingly rendered by an intelligent majority, has never yet been seen. But we are moving towards such a condition of world consciousness and are on our way towards experimenting with it. Let me here briefly indicate to you some of the modes of government which have been tried out or will be tried out in the future. 1. government by a recognized spiritual hierarchy. This hierarchy will be related to the masses of the people by a chain of developed men and women who will act as the intermediaries between the ruling and spiritual body and the people who are oriented to a world of right values. This form of world control lies indefinitely ahead. When it becomes possible so to govern, the planetary hierarchy will have made a major approach to Earth, and there will then be thousands of men and women in touch with their organization because they will be developed enough to be sensitive to its thoughts and ideas. 2. Government by an oligarchy of illumined minds, recognized as such by the mass thinkers and therefore chosen by them to rule. This they will do through the education of the thinkers of the race and group ideas and the right application. The system of education, then prevalent, will be utilized as the medium of reaching the masses and swinging them into line with the major ideas, and this will be done not by force, but through right understanding, through analysis, discussion, and experiment. Curiously enough, from the point of view of many, the spiritual hierarchy will then work largely through the world's scientists who, being by that time convinced of the factual reality of the soul and wise in the uses of the forces of the soul and of nature, will constitute a linking body of occultists. So, I mean, you can just hear like the folks,
what document is this from?
It's Alice Bailey's work called "The Externalization of the Hierarchy." Externalization of the Hierarchy. Yeah.
All right. Interesting. Yes. Ooh, yeah, that's a little sus.
Yeah, and then she talks about some other modes of government, like government by true democracy, government by dictatorship, which is different from, I guess, the oligarchy of enlightened people. She's kind of critical of it. Ruled by dictators whose animating principle is not one of New Age ideals emerging in their particular time, but an idealism of a more material kind, generally recognized present idealism. They are not usually reactionary, nor are they found among the intuitive workers of their age. They take what is grounded, settled, and easily available, made so by thinkers of their time, and then give it a material, national, and selfish twist and objective, and so force it on the masses by fear, warlike means, and material promises. They belong, therefore, more practically to the third ray methods of work, for they are intelligent, expedient, and materially constructive. True idealism, involving as it must the New Age patterns and religious incentives, are lacking in their techniques. Nevertheless, they do lead the race another step, for they have a mass effect in evoking thought and sometimes eventual resistance as a result of that thought. Okay, interesting.
Maybe that's the Silicon Valley billionaires or the third ray of light.
I guess so, yeah.
Hyper-materialist.
Yeah, that they have a positive dialectical effect, but yeah, they're not truly enlightened. They're a bit too selfish and warlike. That's a sus paragraph. But anyway,
if I were building a United Nations organization, I might not include an organization that worships what you just read.
Well,
maybe,
unless think about it kind of
sounds good.
Yeah, it is a little bit who is making this decision, who's assessing that, but that idea, you can definitely when in reading that, you then kind of start to see, again, this doesn't mean that this is the official ideology of the United Nations. You'd have to think about a broader. Well, okay, yeah. Please do that a second. But I just want to say, you have to think about kind of the broader intellectual milieu of the earlier 20th century and then later, and this type of thing. But yeah, well, let's see what you had to say.
Yeah, of course, Julian Huxley. What is it? The oh my god, the UNESCO. Yeah. He was eugenicist. But no, I thought that it was interesting that this Scottish group, this one, some could say cult, combined the ideas of theosophy and Alice Bailey and moral rearmament. That's always been a pretty interesting group to zoom in on for being kind of one of these mid-century sus kind of self-help movements. It was developed out of the Oxford group, which I feel that also had a connection to AA, right? Frank Buchman's Oxford group.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. It was inspired by the Oxford group.
Right. It was originally the First Century Christian Fellowship. This guy was American, but then he ended up going to Oxford for a while, and then came up with this kind of own take on philosophy and Christianity. But his kind of vibe during World War II was a little bit interesting because, this eventually became a big anti-communist organization. But Buchmann and the MRA faced criticism for Buchmann's pro-Nazi and anti-Semitic statement, quote, "I thank heaven for a man like Adolf Hitler, who built a front line of defense against the Antichrist of communism. My barber in London told me Hitler saved all Europe from communism. That's how he felt. Of course, I don't condone everything the Nazis do. Anti-Semitism? Bad, naturally. I suppose Hitler sees a Karl Marx in every Jew." He continued, "But think what it would mean to the world if Hitler surrendered to God, or Mussolini, or any dictator."
Yeah.
This is the God control guy.
Yeah.
Any dictator. "Through such a man, God could control a nation overnight and solve every last bewildering problem." This quote caused the MRA to have problems recruiting members.
Yeah.
Buchmann also supported a theocratic fascist state to defeat communism. Quote, "Spain has taught us what godless communism will bring. Human problems aren't economic. They're moral. They can't be solved by immoral measures. They could be solved within a God-controlled democracy, or perhaps I should say a theocracy, and they could be solved through a God-controlled fascist dictatorship."
Yeah, I
Okay,
think ever
all
since
right,
reading that like
cool.
years ago for the first time, like I think about the term
Right,
God controlled
right.
all the time.
Yeah,
you know,
God-controlled.
like,
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
yeah.
I will say, like, attacked from both left and right. It says that the MRA faced criticism for their views on Hitler, Nazism, and fascism. In 1951, the Catholic Church ordered its members not to join the MRA because it supported the heresy of Illuminism. The organization was also criticized by Radio Moscow Overseas Service for its anti-communist ideals in November 1952, saying, quote, "Moral rearmament supplants the inevitable class war by the, quote, permanent struggle between good and evil, and has the power to attract radical revolutionary minds." The MRA has been described as an ineffective cult with absolutes that were naive, impossible to fulfill, and overly dependent upon personal revelations. Actress Glenn Close, whose parents were part of the movement, publicly called the organization a cult. So, a little sus. We have like a right-wing fascist God control kind of cult, and then somebody merges it with theosophy and like UFO channeling, and then they build like the biggest cult in like one of the biggest cults in Britain, and then that group ends up training people for like UN sustainable development. Kind of a funny trajectory. But then the book I wanted to bring up, I was looking for any kind of hits on like Lucy's Trust from like old school conspiracy kind of writing, and I did find I found this book on CIA.org, but this is like the story of the Committee of 300 by Coleman. I forget what his first name is, but this I think came out I think it came out in the 90s, and I feel like this is a lot of quotes from this book would be like circulating on early internet kind of conspiracy boards. And I mean, you don't hear about it talked about too much, the Committee of 300, but every now and then you'll see people like invoke it. And this is sort of a, it's a certain take on like the globalist like council that basically controls the world. So I'll just read, there's two mentions of Lucy's Trust in this book. I'll read the second one, basically just to give you a sense of what they propose. This author writes, "The Committee of 300 consists of certain individuals, specialists in their own fields, including cultus diabolicus, mind-altering drugs, and specialists in murder by poison, intelligence, banking, and every facet of commercial activity. It will be necessary to mention former members since deceased because of their former roles and because their places were given to family members or new members considered worthy of the honor. Included in the membership of the Committee of 300 are the old families of the European black nobility, the American Eastern liberal establishment, in Freemason hierarchy and the Order of Skull and Bones, we mean the High Wasp Yankees, the Illuminati, or as it is known by the committee, quote, all caps, Mariah Conquering Wind, the Mumma Group, the National and World Council of Churches, the Circle of Initiates, the Nine Unknown Men, Luce's Trust, Jesuit Liberation Theologists, the Order of the Elders of Zion, the Nazi, it's spelled Nasi Princes. No, this is kind of a crazy book. The Nazi Princes, International Monetary Fund, Bank of International Settlements, United Nations, the Central British Bank, the Quator Coronati, Italian P2 Masonry, especially those in the Vatican hierarchy, the Central Intelligence Agency, Tavistock Institute, selected personnel, various members of leading foundations and insurance companies named in the list that follow, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank, I think That
he
might be
wove
HSBC.
like every
everybody.
like conspiracy like bugbear.
Yeah.
Together.
Hold on, I'm not
Oh,
done.
all right. Sorry,
I'm not done.
I thought
the
got
Cine
all of them.
Foundation, German Marshall Fund, Ditchley Foundation, NATO, Club of Rome, Environmentalists, capitalized, the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, Knights of Malta, One World Government Church, Socialist International, Black Order, Tula Society, Onda Nerbe Rosicrucianists, the Great Superior Ones, and literally hundreds of other organizations. What then are we looking at? A loosely knit gathering of people with weird ideas? Certainly not. In the Committee of 300, which has a 150-year history, we have some of the most brilliant intellects assembled to form a completely totalitarian, absolutely controlled, new society. Only it isn't new, having drawn most of its ideas from the clubs of cultus diabolicus. It strives towards a one-world government rather well described by one of its late members, H.G. Wells, in his work commissioned by the committee, which Wells boldly called The Open Conspiracy, Plans for a World Revolution.
So wait a minute, who wrote this? And
this guy
what's their deal?
Coleman wrote this, and I assume probably self-published it in the 1990s. This is a raw document, as you can see, and it is kind of just like throwing everything in there. The only other mention, this is how I found the book, that is a little bit cryptic. It says the Carter administration accelerated the collapse of our economy and our military strength, the latter begun by Club of Rome and Luce's Trust member Robert Strange McNamara. I actually didn't know that Robert McNamara's middle name was Strange, but that's funny. But I noticed like a tweet saying that Robert McNamara was a member of Luce's Trust, which I was like, okay,
Is that true?
Very weird if true. I can't find any other like hard evidence except for like this book, which honestly I'm taking with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I would not assume that is true.
Yeah, though, Robert Strange McNamara was, the president of Ford Motor Company and was like one of these like technocratic whiz kid guys that, got us into the Vietnam War and, is definitely like an elite, like moving around, kind of like this technocratic elite kind of guy. There's a documentary made about him where he's caught in the fog of war, and it's so funny. And
you know what? I think I may have found something. These are okay. Let's see. This is an earlier report from 1968. This might be like the kernel of. Maybe this isn't the kernel of truth, but this might be like an earlier version of the idea.
Mm-hmm.
This is by Edith Kermit Roosevelt.
Oh.
Yeah,
wait,
former First Lady.
Edith
of the
Kermit
United
Roosevelt?
States. I believe so. Maybe. Oh no, it's it can't
Kermit
be.
Roosevelt
This
was
is from The Wanderer, published in 1968. So it
Okay.
can't be that Edith Kermit Roosevelt. Maybe it was a different one.
Well, Kermit Roosevelt was an intelligence officer, and if I recall correctly, he was the grandson of Teddy Roosevelt.
Well, this is Edith Kermit Roosevelt, so it certainly isn't the former
A
First
woman.
Lady.
Well, you know how
yeah.
these guys, these Dutch people are. They probably gave him a girl name, because it's no. It's probably
I
not.
don't know.
I think Kermit's
yeah.
name is not Edith.
It is interesting that there's. This is very interesting. I just found this in. Again, it's like published in like the hearings, reports, and prints of the House Committee on Ways and Means. But I'm not sure if that's actually the correct title because I'm seeing it on Google Books here. But it may be. But anyway, so this is from The Wanderer. Any serious student of the politics sooner or later stumbles upon the existence of a goofy network. These are the secular cults which attract bored socialites and cash register types in search of a common humanity. As semi-secretive networks, they serve in addition as convenient covers for activities by international cartels and worldwide intelligence services. So far, pretty true. During the days of the New Deal, a congery of political and financial figures, including Vice President Henry Wallace, became mixed up with a Russian guru called Nicholas Roerich, who presided over a Tibetan lamasery on Riverside Drive in New York City. Kind of true. Wallace sent his guru to Asia to examine grass seed under a grant from the Department of Agriculture. In his book entitled The Coming of the New Deal, Arthur M. Schlesinger Jr. wrote that Wallace even included Treasury Secretary Henry M. Morgenthau to place the symbol of the cult on the U.S. dollar bill. This is the all-seeing eye above a truncated pyramid. Yeah, I'm not sure if like that was Yeah, I mean, well, actually, I think that basically, yeah, it was Wallace who, yeah, so it's kind of true. We see the same symbolism today in the architectural plan for the Temple of Understanding, the spiritual United Nations that is being structured on the banks of the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. The 5 million edifice will feature the symbolism of a black magic practiced by the high priest of ancient Egypt. The building will contain a giant eye, a circular pool of water, which reflects light beamed onto it by a dome faceted to resemble a many-colored diamond. The Temple movement, which has offices in the nation's capital, embraces esoteric activities in India, Great Britain, Holland, Belgium, Israel, the United Arab Republic, Poland, Union of South Africa, Ghana, and other countries. Cooperating groups include Lucis Trust, a tax-exempt nonprofit corporation which operates the Arcane School, World Goodwill, and Triangles, with offices in the United States at it says 866 UN Plaza, not
okay, so close, so close.
New York City. These groups regularly hold full moon meditation meetings to promote the New World religion at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Here, groups of, quote, New World servers are instructed to reform triangles, groups of 3, consisting of a network of light and goodwill covering the entire planet. The arcane or hidden mysteries of the temple also include planned political mysteries. Recently, the Donner Foundation gave the nonprofit Temple of Understanding a $15,000 grant. At the same time, the Donner Foundation gave the American Foreign Service Association $33,000 at the suggestion of Joseph E. Johnson, president of the Carnegie Endowment, who is known as the MC of the Eastern Establishment. Johnson is using the American Foreign Service Association and the Donner Foundation as fronts during the interval between the presidential election and the inauguration to manipulate State Department staffing. The Temple of Understanding has impressive political support. The temple was endorsed by President Johnson. A temple brochure lists endorsements by 8 ambassadors and a number of important government officials, including Robert Strange McNamara, while Defense Secretary. The brochure also lists an endorsement by Reuben S. Nathan while he was policy director of Radio Free Europe, which has CIA links, before he went to Vietnam for psychological warfare operations.
Wait, who did that before they went to psychological warfare?
Reuben S. Nathan, Dr. Reuben S. Nathan.
Huh, okay. I hadn't heard of him before. Wow, okay. So there was, and this was was this a front group of Lucis Trust or like a initiative of Lucis Trust? The Temple of Understanding?
I think they, hold on, let me scroll back down to it because I was trying to figure out what exactly.
I see their website now.
Yeah. Was this temple ever built? Because it seemed like it was a big project as described by Edith Kermit there.
They feature a painting of the Tree of Life on their pictorial history page.
They were, I guess, a cooperating group in the movement around building this temple. Again, this is kind of a vague article.
Right. I see the Dalai Lama and one of looks like one of the kings of Saudi Arabia. I forget which one. A lot of Dalai Lama
included in
pics.
briefings of the House Ways and Means Committee, maybe to oppose this building of the Temple of Understanding.
You don't think people? It seems like the Democrats,
maybe someone did.
Like the Johnson administration people, were supportive of it, right?
So some people were, and maybe some people, which it seems like a bipartisan thing, but maybe. Someone was opposed to it.
The Temple of Understanding today is accredited through ECOSOC with special consultative status. They are also accredited by the Department of Global Communications. Their current work at the UN is in coalition with a set of partners, including Mining Working Group, Women's Major Group, United Nations Environmental Program, NGO Committee on Freedom of Religion or Belief, Women's Working Group on Financing for Development, UN Committee on the Rights of Indigenous People, Committee of Religious NGOs, Climate Working Group. They also offer programming for Interfaith Harmony Week and are active in the High-Level Political Forum and many other UN convenings. So, they do a lot of... they're in ECOSOC, which I think maybe the Findhorn Foundation also is affiliated with.
And so is Lucis Trust.
Yeah, so is Lucis Trust. Yeah, so, okay, that's interesting. So, I don't know, maybe you think the author might have grafted, the sort of Temple of Understanding Lucis Trust.
Well, I think that the Lucis Trust probably did support the Temple of Understanding, they do seem to have aligned ideas. But my point was that I think that that might be the seed of the idea that Robert Strange McNamara was a member of the Lucis Trust because he supported the Temple of Understanding, or he signed some, he had a signature on some brochure That might have been like, where the idea of his involvement came from. Maybe, maybe he was more involved, but that's like one, indication. It doesn't quite straight up say he was a member of the Lucis Trust or of the Temple of Understanding, but at least a supporter.
That would make sense as a kind of like a sort of like liberal American American backed project to like, support peace and understanding, like while you're literally doing the Vietnam War, just like, we support the Temple of Understanding, it sounds about. And all these rich people, the bored socialites. Actually, speaking of bored socialites, and this, I think, this is a perfect springboard into question number 2.
Well, I wanted to say one thing, like, relative to, the, it was a while ago that I wanted to make this point, but, before you read that thing from that book by that guy where he was rattling off all the things, like actually the point that I wanted to make was like relative to like we have a question later on, I'm not sure if we'll get to it, but about like the Jesuits and like it kind of like makes sense in a way, like when you think about it, like if you think about like someone who is growing up and like like a religious household or something, or like like of any denomination or anything, like is like, and they're thinking about like, if they want to give back to the world or something, a lot of the time like religious like organizations like religions have like a sort of an internationalist like Christianity definitely has one, even like even within something like Buddhism, like either the religion like doesn't care about like a universalist idea at all, or they have like a kind of interest for that, like the Jesuits being like an example, or like joining like a Catholic order, or like doing missionary work or anything like that, right? So like if you have like a sort of like conventional religion, usually in most cases, like you're not going to be like rushing to, you're not going to be like, oh, I want to like be a part of the United Nations. So, like, the Project of the United Nations is like what I want to be involved in. But, for like a new age religion, right? A religion that's like actively rejecting that, it kind of makes sense that like that would kind of like pour itself into like the vessel of the United Nations, like, very eagerly.
There's syncretistic nature and kind of borrowing from like a bunch of different sources and kind of preaching usually like a universalist kind of theology, I would say. More often than not, like in the last 200 years, it's kind of been like that. So and also the sponsorship and the interest that a lot of like elites themselves in this era and still today, have in kind of that the woo woo kind of stuff. Like I'd say that there's probably, I would argue that there's definitely above average like interest and participation in the very wealthiest classes, like the classes that are closest to power, have almost disproportionate. Like, look at RFK's family; they're all one-shotted by ayahuasca. You know what I mean? Like no doubt about it. And
I mean that's a whole other situation, but for sure, but I mean. In general, like it is true that like, to the point about like, Alex Jones, like the Jade Helm type of stuff, like, or even I mentioned the last episode, like a Thief in the Night, or a couple episodes ago, that like evangelical movie where like the bad guy is like basically the UN, like like a souped up UN thing, or like I think that even happens in the Left Behind books too, like the UN is kind of like evil. Like a big, like a big like bugbear, like something to be afraid. And it makes like if you're reading that like externalization of hierarchy thing, like you could see how that is like, like what, like they're saying like we're gonna impose like a new global religion by externalizing our ashrams through like basically like an oligarchy of enlightened people who like will cultivate like a mass consciousness in the direction that like it must be cultivated. It's like kind of like it kind of like you don't really have to take. Like that sort of like obviously there is like paranoia about like the UN like in those sort of discourses. However, like you don't have to take like too big of a jump from like the utopian vision of like the Lucis Trust to the dystopian vision of like an but like a
kind of new age Huxleyan dystopia with like class division,
like an imposed like new age religion that's going to be like ruled by a spiritual hierarchy. That
spiritual
like,
Esperanto.
Like maybe we need to have an enlightened dictatorship to help like dialectically advance ourselves to being ready for that. Like it's kind of like all right. But
No, it's crazy. Like, I can't blame anybody, though. I think the right wingers, like people in the Committee of 300, often get it wrong by thinking that, I think what scares them is like the loss of American sovereignty. And like, even though there's a lot of stuff in this book, just scanning.
I mean, I feel like the Committee of 300, like where does like the idea of the Committee of 300 originate? Because like
there are organizations that I've read other books about, like Le Cercle and like the Pilgrim Society and other groups like that are, you know, either based in France or the Panay Circle. There are groups like that, you know, or Bilderberg for that matter, that are like super powerful, exclusive groups of like people that get together and kind of like coordinate, that have, you know, like top spy people, industrialists, like European nobility. Like there's a grain of truth that like these people do congregate in these big kind of you know, settings and do stuff like that. And maybe the Committee of 300 is like riffing off of that and presenting this sort of like just vast overarching, like everybody's kind of in on it. It's definitely the assertion of this book that like anti-communism is sus, but also like communism is fake and like created by the Committee of 300 to be like a false enemy, that like they're being used as pawns by the 300 folks, you know, and like they're going to be dispensed with, but actually like the real threat is they're going to take away American sovereignty. But then he says at one point, like, we need to get rid of this Trojan horse and like clean up our own house before we have any chance of going out and like defeating communism, which is like, okay, you still want to destroy communism so bad, you know, like even though you realize that these elites are all psyoping you. So it's like got that confused kind of POV. But I did stumble upon something, you know, when you mentioned like, you know, bored wealthy socialites and other under this section about the coordinating institutions that like run our lives in the West. He gives like a long list. There is some mentions of the UN, but then I just happened to land on this one, and this is the one that'll springboard perfectly into question number 2. He lists the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions in Santa Barbara, California. He says, this is a small blurb, founder Robert Hutchins of the Committee of 300, Harry Ashmore, Frank Kelly, and a large group of, quote, fellows. Purpose, to spread ideas that will bring on social reforms of the liberal kind with democracy as an ideology. One of its activities is to draft a new constitution for the U.S., which will be strongly monarchical and socialistic, as found in Denmark. The center is in, quote, Olympian stronghold. Located in Santa Barbara, it is housed in what is affectionately called the Parthenon. Former Representative John Rarick called it, quote, an outfit loaded with communists. Well, you know, it's like famously funded by the Ford Foundation, etc. By 1973, work on a new U.S. Constitution was in its 35th draft, which proposes an amendment guaranteeing, quote, environmental rights, the thrust of which is to reduce the industrial base of the U.S. to a mere whisper of what it was in 1969. In other words, this institution is carrying out Club of Rome, zero growth, post-industrial policies laid down by the Committee of 300. Some of its other aims are control of economic cycles, welfare, regulation of business and national public works, control of pollution. Speaking on behalf of the Committee of 300, Ashmore says the function of the CSDI is to find ways and means of making our political system work more effectively. Quote, we must change education and we must consider a new U.S. Constitution and a constitution for the world, Ashmore says. No. His further goals articulated by Ashmore are 1. Membership of the UN must be made universal. 2. UN must be strengthened. 3. Southeast Asia must be neutralized. He puts in parentheses, for neutralized, read communized. Okay. 4. Cold War must be ended. 5. Racial discrimination must be abolished. 6. Developing nations must be assisted. Parentheses, meaning assisted to destruct. 7. No military solutions to problems. Pity they didn't tell George Bush that before the Gulf War. 8. National solutions are not adequate. 9. Coexistence is necessary. Okay, so despite that being a little bit of a confused summary of the CSDI, that is an institution that's popped up in multiple episodes, and even, I just remembered, it pops up with an interesting theosophical connection, right? Because one of the professors at UCSB that was like a fellow at CSDI for years and was like a big wig in all its programs was one of the early coiners of the word parapolitics, Dr. Raghavan Iyer. right?
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Raghavan Iyer, I think, might have been the head, along with his wife, of a Theosophical Lodge in Santa Barbara that I think is still there today. And interestingly, he was also the academic mentor and I think like doctoral advisor of a certain Lieutenant Colonel Michael Angelo Aquino.
Yes. Before we move completely on, as far as I can tell, the idea of the Committee of 300, just, for the record, doesn't seem like it originates in a group that was ever like called that or any like thing. It just seems like at one point in the early 20th century, like a German politician, Walther Rathenau, like made some remark that like 300 men like control the destiny of Europe, and they all know each other. And then like
which
from
like
there,
roughly
people,
speaking
like,
might be
it.
true. Yeah.
Which,
like roughly speaking could be true.
Yeah, like it's also kind of like an abstract idea, which is like like there are like people who are more powerful than others, and like they often interact with one another and they often coordinate.
Right. This
like,
is just class a class.
Obviously, there are other factors in determining what happens in the world. However, there are people who are disproportionately powerful, and they often like have relationships on a class basis. But I guess people ran with that and thought that it was like an admission of like a Jewish conspiracy, and then like that's kind of like it went, that kind of like people ran with it in that direction, and then I guess it became more abstract again, and before becoming like a generic conspiracy term,
like 90s thing of like every powerful person's in on it kind
and
of
I
thing.
guess it's kind of interesting how like it seemed like he expanded it to be like not 300 people but like 300 organizations or something.
I don't think he lists 300, and it's unclear if it's like this is literal, like 300, like there's only like 300 like membership slots or whatever. But I think I'm not seeing. I feel like this is one of these 90s kind of books that is like kind of a ideologically and factually loose, and kind of all over the place, like depiction.
It is one of those files that was like uploaded by the CIA, right? Like to their website. Yeah, like who is John Coleman and why is that relevant? I guess like was it relevant? Like
they often have anything that like any book I've found that sort of implicates the CIA as being like part of a sinister conspiracy to do XYZ, like tends to end up on CIA.gov.
Was supposed to provide some like insight into some kind of like threat, or domestic, like a white supremacist group or something. I was wondering if the author was
extremist literature, anti-government literature, that kind of thing. And I think I found like Bloodlines of the Illuminati by Fritz Springmeier on CIA.gov.
A lot of those books are on there. Yeah.
In addition to more like
Turner Diaries, stuff like that.
Yeah. In addition to more like factual stuff, like old issues of like Covert Action Quarterly that talk about like Nazi CIA collabs and shit like that.
A lot of like Islamist writings are on there as well. Like
Yeah, but it did make me think, about Santa Barbara, and we were scrolling through, and we were looking for spooky questions, and that is what led us to this one, number 2. And I have to hand it to Steely Dan Panman that like I actually did not know about this case, but it's definitely spooky. So they write on May 18th, 2022. Hey fellas, newly initiated acolyte here. Curious if anyone else has looked into Michael Aquino's time in Santa Barbara. After some cursory Google searches, I came across some interesting info. So there's a linked article here. The linked article references the date of June 21st, 1975, as the day which the entity set supposedly dictated to Aquino the Book of Coming Forth by Night. Curiously, if one Googles June 21st, 1975, Santa Barbara, the recently reopened cold case murder of Paul Ornelas comes up. The murder, which is said to have taken place on this same date, June 21st, 1975, the summer solstice, in Santa Barbara. An odd coincidence. Has this come to anyone else's attention? Oof. I mean,
let's look into this.
I literally was just like, no, my fucking God, no way. Like, no, what? Like, because I mean, I remember Aquino always said that he was on a beach on the summer solstice of 1975 in Santa Barbara, and that's when Set appeared to him, and that's when he made his big break from the Church of Satan and became, and founded the Temple of Set, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And there was a notorious unsolved murder in the same city on the same solstice night. Now, obviously, innocent until proven guilty and all of that.
Yes, right.
But let's consider this for a second, because Santa Barbara is not a high crime community, let's say. It's like a beach city. It's got a big public university there, well known as a party school, but I actually don't know. They are on the quarter system, so they might be just finishing the school year at the end of June. They go out later than semester colleges do. But even still, maybe the students might have already cleared out for the summer, by June 21st. And this teenager, I believe, it is an underage teenager who, along with his brother, had been staying at a boys' camp, a kind of juvenile hall state camp for teenagers that was an alternative to classic jail and juvie hall. Both the brothers had spent the summertime, had spent the months leading up to this, kind of in this camp because of some trouble they had gotten into. And the victim, which was it Paul? Yeah, Paul Ornelas. I think his older brother had just left a week before the murder, and I think Paul was. It's unclear if he was allowed to leave during the weekends or something, but I guess he had 1 week left in the boys' camp, and then they went out partying. Here, I'll read from independent.com. This came out in 2021. So, this might be why it escaped our earliest Aquino deep dives, because we hadn't really looked up Santa Barbara Aquino. If we did, it would have been in 2020, 5 years ago. And this came out in April 2021. So, so the sheriff's office in Santa Barbara County was reopening 4 years ago this murder case into Paul Ornelas. And this article says, the last words Paul Ornelas would say to his brother John were, "I'll be back." As it happened, he never was. The body of Paul Anthony Ornelas was found early the next morning along the railroad tracks near San Marcos High School. The back of his skull had been bashed in, blunt force trauma with a blunt object. The wound was so deep it took 3 inches of cotton to fill it. Paul Ornelas was 15 years old at the time of his murder. His brother John was just 14. All this happened a long time ago, June 21st, 1975 to be exact. The night before was a Friday. John and Paul had been at a party on Wentworth Avenue on the city's Lower West Side. John Ornelas remembers begging his brother not to go. "I had a bad feeling," he recalled. "That was the last I saw of him." Oh my God. He had a premonition that this would have been, I guess, a Saturday night they were going out. Ugh. Like a lot of murders, this one never got solved. Early this April, 45 years later, the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office issued a press release announcing it had officially reopened the Ornelas murder case. Press releases like that don't happen every day. In fact, they never happen at all. Interesting. In the intervening 45 years, John Ornelas graduated from Santa Barbara High School, got a job with the city of Santa Barbara's water department, married, had 2 sons, divorced, and served on the Michael Jackson grand jury, fell in love again, retired, then took another job working as a pipe inspector on the Glen Annie Reservoir in Goleta. Life has been good, but throughout all the years, Ornelas said, he's carried around a big hole in his heart. "We always wanted answers, but we could never get any," he said, speaking for his whole family. "We could never get over the fact someone killed our brother, and there were no answers. The questions don't go away. How could someone do something so cold and cowardly and still live with themselves? Why would they take the life of such a young man? Were they vindictive or jealous?" Over the years, Ornelas became persistence personified, contacting each of the successive detectives assigned to solve his brother's murder. Interesting, quote, "They always told me there were things they couldn't tell me. They said it might jeopardize the case." Ornelas got that. But like many murder victims' family members, he got tired of all the waiting. "I was getting frustrated," he said. Several months ago, Ornelas got a call from Detective Matt Maxwell of the department's Major Crimes Unit. He announced that he'd be taking over the case. He said, "John, you've been patient for all these years. I don't know how I would have acted." Detective Maxwell soon found himself working under the tutelage of Lieutenant Jeffrey McDonald. That's a haunting name for a case like this. Working a cold case, Maxwell said, typically involves lots of interviews, a lot of re-interviews, a lot of looking over the forensic evidence, looking over the past reports. He could see that the original detectives worked the case hard for 3 years. It was a big deal back then, he said, a very big deal. Maybe new avenues of inquiry will emerge. There's been new technology, particularly a rapid new DNA testing machine, the Andy, made by a company out of Colorado. So I think Santa Barbara bought one of these machines, and that allows them to make DNA matches using much smaller DNA strands, et cetera, et cetera. So like even from like a touch, like they could get a strand of your DNA from like, if you touch a steering wheel, for example. They don't need blood, semen, saliva, etc. John Ornelas is third generation Santa Barbara. He grew up in the Ladera apartments on the city's west side, the youngest of 8 kids. His brother Paul was exactly 12 months older. They did everything together. The family's path wasn't easy. Ornelas' father left early on. His mother, Pauline Ornelas Jaramillo, worked as a certified nursing assistant first at Santa Barbara's Old General Hospital and later an acute care nursing home. She had her hands full. John's older brother Vincent was drafted into the military and spent 2 years in Vietnam. That was rough on the family, but he made it home okay. Vince would later become a martial arts specialist, teaching cops and sheriff's deputies the fine points of controlled mayhem, and then worked in juvenile hall for the probation department. The family moved to Oxnard for a while, etc. They would, blah, blah, blah. He said his brother was very charming. The two got into their fair share of young trouble. Okay. In 1975, both would find themselves sent to Los Prietos boys' camp for about half a year. We weren't bad, but we weren't perfect either, Ornelas confided. We didn't go to school all the time. We partied. We were a little out of control sometimes. Things like that. At the camp, the two Ornelas brothers looked after each other. Always close, they got closer still in the 6 months they spent at the camp. Paul also studied restaurant management while there, attending classes at La Colina Junior High School. He was very good at that, too. He would have been a great businessman if he lived, etc. Everything seemed so promising. Then June 21st happened. John Ornelas remembers the West Side Party. At the time, he'd been out of the camp just 1 week. His brother Paul, out on leave, okay, there you go, was to be released 1 week later. So he was out on leave, but he had to go back to the camp for 1 more week. They were celebrating freedom. He remembers going out to use the restroom. When he came back, Paul was just taking off. "I'll be back," Paul Ornelas declared. John would spend the night at his sister's house in Santa Barbara. Their mother would show up the next morning from Oxnard. Another sister was there, too. John remembers the knock on the door and the sheriff's deputies showing up to deliver the bad news. "I was devastated," he said, "but for his mom, it was even worse. It took everything she had and just broke her. I'll never forget the look on her face, etc." Pauline was 40 years old the night her son was killed. Then, the family moved on. They grieved about it for years. For John Ornelas, it all remains very much an open question. He's still not sure what got the case reopened, but he is hoping it's because the detectives have something. If they do, they still can't tell him, but he's confident they mean business. 45 years ago, he noted, there was no social media. Now the echoes are coming back on him with a vengeance. Yeah, wow.
And when was this article published?
April 2021. So 4 years ago. So
maybe
I wonder,
they found something in Aquino's house after he died.
I was honestly, that's exactly what I was fucking thinking. What happened that changed things in? I think Aquino died in 2019, right?
Yeah,
the end of 2019.
I will say that I kind of wonder, just not to scully this too much, but I do wonder how true, because Aquino has always said it was midsummer, which I almost feel is a way of obfuscating the date a little bit. And I do think that technically speaking, if it even happened, as he says it happened, if it was on the summer solstice, like, and truly on the day of midsummer. I think that would have been the 22nd and the 21st. Again, they would be still kind of close in time, but it is worth noting.
Because I went and looked independently, even though, Steely Dan Pan Man said, that let me see. I'm trying to get this article that allegedly mentions it, but I feel like Aquino literally has said, and I found something that listed it as this happened on the summer solstice. Okay, I'm looking at the Daily Nexus news article. This is I think the campus newspaper from Friday 1976 about Michael Aquino. Local Satan worshipers get set. So let's see. Does he mention? So this is an article with a student journalist. I'm just seeing if solstice pops up here, or maybe June 21st. But no, June 21st is I'm a Cancer. My birthday's around that time, so I'm
right,
aware
usually
of that.
It is. It was a slightly late, and in fact, I think, it
says here
he describes it as the eve of the solstice. So
on the night. If it's the eve of the solstice, it says here on June 21st, 1975, set dictated to Aquino the book of Coming Forth by Night. So
what is that from? Is that on the?
It's from this newspaper article that Steely Dan Pan Man found, the Daily Nexus from the University of Santa Barbara, November 1976. It's a profile of Aquino,
all right.
And says, and I feel like he himself has described it because he loves talking on the summer solstice of 1975. I was visited by an entity known as.
It would have had to be on the eve of the summer solstice.
Why?
Because the summer solstice in 1975 wasn't on the 21st. It was on the 22nd.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. So you looked it up and astrologically or whatever calendar-wise.
But that doesn't mean that, if he said he did it on the 21st, which, it seems like he likely did if that's from the 19,
right.
Then it must have been on the eve of the summer solstice.
Yeah, maybe he just flubbed that to when he says I did it on the summer solstice. You maybe going back. I'm kind of remembering just from memory of him saying summer solstice, but maybe he did qualify it by saying the eve. But in this article, he specifically says June 21st as the night that he did this, which is the same night that this kid was abducted from. Well, it's unclear, but disappeared after a party, after a house party, and then was found by the railroad tracks the next morning, bludgeoned. Brutally bludgeoned on the head to death. And there's people could, hey, you guys are being, just because somebody's a Satanist who talked to Set in the same city in the same night, and they're also a kind of credibly charged pedophile and psychological operations officers in the Phoenix program, etc. That doesn't mean that he had anything to do with it, but it's got this Mandy vibe to it that I can't quite shake. I don't know. I think there was a 2025 article by Johnny Ornelas, I think his brother, who was profiled. I think this is in the Santa Barbara Independent. This is in June of this year. He writes, because I guess it was the anniversary, right? It's the 50-year anniversary this year. So let's see. His case remains an unsolved homicide. It's mostly a kind of a memorial to his brother. It's a short little piece. But, knowing his death was not natural, he was killed.
To the person in the chat who asked, are they live? We are live. Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought that was self-evident.
Yeah.
I see. Or is the pre-recorded?
Yeah.
No, we are indeed live, chat.
Yeah.
We are here
it right now.
Yeah.
The magic of live performance.
I'm trying to see. Okay, and I guess it's not super unusual for cops to be we have evidence, but we can't really share it with you for for reasons we won't elaborate on. That seems like standard operating procedure, but
he is wearing a cross in this picture of him. Maybe Guido was just infuriated. No, I don't want to again, there's the only real evidence is that ritual took place, and I
kind of wonder, is there anything else that would have like he's at a party, presumably with like a teenager party, I think, a party on Wentworth Avenue on the city's Lower West Side. Yeah, like I don't know how close that is to like the campus or whatever, but it's also unclear like where was he go. It seemed like he was like hopping in somebody's car to like go somewhere else, you know, when he was split up from his brother, right? That's what it sounded like. Also, the boys' camp they were in, I find, I don't know, maybe kind of interesting.
I guess that is an interesting angle, yeah.
I looked up the Los Prietos boys' camp, and I think it's still around, but they're considering closing it because there's been a drop in like juvenile, you know, prisoners and juvenile crime and stuff like that. But it was like a state-run kind of institution, and I don't know, like with Aquino, he was in and out, I think, of Santa Barbara at this time. I mean, obviously he was there, but I think he might have been getting his PhD, his master's and his PhD at UCSB, like studying under Raghavan Iyer in 1975, because he was up in San Francisco for a bit. He was deployed, active duty, you know, in Vietnam, but also in a few different bases around the country. And he was still in the Army Reserve, but he went down, like definitely was at least part-time living there to get his master's and PhD, which he wrote about, like his dissertation about the neutron bomb, right? In like 1979, 1980 is when he graduated. So it might have been when he like just returned back to Santa Barbara to start like his graduate studies, which is when kind of this murder happened. So like he's, I have to assume, you know, it's like he's living there. He's not just like popping in for like a day, like he's like living there. Also, I think maybe we've touched on it in subsequent episodes about Aquino, but you know, he has like deep connections to Santa Barbara, which I don't think we've ever like fully really unpacked or like explained. You know, I think he went to a boarding school there.
Yeah.
For his high school years, right?
Yes. Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I think his mom had connections like through her family. It might have been they might have had a second home down there, or, you know, they knew people in Santa Barbara. Like Santa Barbara always was a kind of like wealthy, almost Pasadena-esque kind of enclave for like very wealthy people, right, in California. And particularly for like people going down from the Bay Area.
Did you say he went to a private school? I think he went to like a, you know, Santa Barbara senior high school, but you know, he went to school.
Michael
there.
Aquino did?
Yeah.
Huh. That I would be surprised. I mean, that's even
He's a
almost
graduate
like
of Santa Barbara High School and an Eagle Scout, as we know. Yeah.
That's actually interesting that because that would like require him pretty much to like have a home in Santa Barbara to live at or be living with somebody. Because I always assumed maybe there's like a boarding school in Santa Barbara that he like boarded at, right? But like maybe, I don't know, maybe that was around the time of his parents' divorce and he moved down there perhaps with his mother. He doesn't really talk about, I had never heard him talk about like his high school years too much, except that he was an Eagle Scout. Yeah, you're right. It says that right on his Wikipedia. Wow, he finally has his own Wikipedia. We did it. Remember when it would only pop up as like the Temple of Set?
Yeah, true. Like when we started this podcast, he did not have a Wikipedia article.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it was filed under Temple of Set.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, he was the national commander of the Eagle Scout Honor Society, lest we forget. And, yeah, it's very, peculiar. I think maybe with Betty Ford Aquino, like they might have bought a little house or maybe a big house down in Santa Barbara around the time of...
Oh, you know what? Before I forget, since we're talking about this, I actually noticed, like, in the comments on, like, you know, because he reposted the Aquino episode, and I noticed some guys saying, like, lies, like, you know, this is all lies, like, you know, the Temple of Set does not accept members by phone. I do not believe you. I would love to see your membership card. Well, since we now do the show by video, I happen to have right here my official Temple of Set membership card, proving that I did, in fact, infiltrate the Temple of Set. With a mysterious mag swipe on the back. that I never understood or
folks. We're you did it. I remember holding that thing. It was pretty heavy.
It's like kind of bendy here. Like, and
does it have a barcode on it that you like verifies?
I don't think it has. I don't know. They just have to swipe on the back, but that's about it. It's actually kind of sus that I like still have this in my wallet. I feel like it's like evil. I probably should like put this. Else.
Watch out, it's not spying.
But I mean, I'm
you.
glad I have it because like to that guy who's like, oh, you are lying. No, I'm not lying. In fact, I still also have my Setian white pentagram also, but hopefully this suffices because it's I think a little bit more
just for the record, Magister Bleep, Magister Redacted, do not come after us. You got James O'Keefe. Deal with it. It's not a big deal. Also, like any haters that are like, call it sus because he joined the Temple of Set. Shut the fuck up. He was infiltrating them. He only went to level 1. He didn't do any rituals.
And it was also like like it was a thing between me and Dimitri. Like we were kind of like talking about at the time. Like
you had my blessing. You definitely had my blessing.
Yeah, like it was kind of like a prank between friends in a way. Like we were like, let's go. Because like you like kind of were talking about to me, and I was like, we were kind of laughing at this organization, and we were like, okay, well, let's see if we could, and I was like, I definitely can get in. I think it was kind of like, because they have like all this mystique and everything, blah blah blah. I mean, I think it's like completely understandable, and whatever.
His Eagle Scout ass wanted to.
Like to the guy who's like, oh, they don't interview members. I found, I did have to send in like a mail application first, but then if you get to the second phase, I'm sorry if you weren't satanic enough to get to the phone interview, but it did happen. Yes, and I don't know what these hieroglyphs say on the bottom here, but I'm sure I could actually decode them. I did take Middle Egyptian. No, they probably say something. I have a feeling they actually say something, but my Middle Egyptian is too rusty to decode them on the spot. But yeah. So there you go.
So, I mean, I don't know. It opens up you know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of the now totally forgotten Epstein birthday book where it's like this very disturbing, like little paragraph, like story. And then it's a picture of Jeffrey Epstein wearing like a silk stocking mask and next to another guy that, don't sue me, but kind of looks like billionaire Ron Burkle. Talking about how they had a game called like Catch and Kill, like Rob and Kill, and they would just run around on like the Venice boardwalk and like kill somebody and like kill a woman and like rob them, like it was like murder for fun. They were at least joking about how they like to put on masks and go out and just do like random sicko violent crimes, like for fun, for the thrill of it or whatever. And I don't know, that's just like. Somebody like Michael Aquino, the Phoenix program operator, the great Setian himself, hanging out with all these theosophists in Santa Barbara, still in the army, and given the importance of this, appearance by Set, like this is a big deal in Aquino's life, right?
Yeah. It's defining moment for sure. Yeah.
Whatever you want to say about him, he I think is a man who took his rituals pretty seriously.
Yes,
and took the idea of magic with a K seriously.
He did not take it lightly. He took it very seriously. In fact, even in Maggie Stershaw himself, in that phone call that I had with him, he was like, when one of these days, like everything's gonna go boom. He was like, it'll destroy. It wasn't actually very appealing in certain ways. It's like at first it'll destroy your life, and then your life will get like really good or something. I'm like, all right. My life's fine.
Magister redacted.
Yeah. Sorry, Magister redacted.
Magister redacted. Don't want any problems, but you did say that, so allegedly. So that the followers probably do, but Aquino, this is a guy that got all the way while serving, I think, on like the NATO staff. Got permission, I presume, to go to Heinrich Himmler's castle and do like a Nazi dagger ritual. To like invoke Set to like win the Cold War or something, I mean, there was nothing sacrificial alleged in that actual working, but the way he fondles that SS dagger in like the occult experience documentary makes me like a little bit nervous that this guy, at least a little animal sacrifice, maybe. I mean, like, if he doesn't, like, who would? You know what I mean? In terms of like a dark practitioner of like, this kind of magic and everything. So for such a big thing to like consecrate this new aeon of Set that had begun, not to sound like a satanic panic guest on Oprah in the 80s, but, I did get a chance to look back at all of those, like, exposing Satan's underground and all these things. And like, remember the Coke bottle glasses guy was like, we got out to the graveyard, and then suddenly, I don't know what happened, but there was like a guy on like a slab, and there were like knives sticking out of him. And I'm like, and who was the grotto leader?
Yeah.
Who was the name of your grotto leader? And all that kind of shit. And then like I ran away because it was like too scary. And they were actually killing people. No. And, these stories bounce around. You never quite get... I mean, there are... I almost forgot, like, even in that Geraldo thing, where definitely some of it is, like, being hyped up and into this, like, hysterical media kind of phenomenon to, like, scare the shit out of people. But there still are people, like, interviewed in jail that got into Satanism as, like, teenagers and then, like, killed their best friends so they could have 10,000 souls in hell. I mean, that's what they... Like, the most you could argue is that, okay, maybe they concocted this story because their lawyers thought that maybe if they like repented to like Christianity and became like, the devil got a hold of me, that maybe they could like escape death row by like doing that kind of act. But I don't know. Like, I feel like you could just, you don't have to do the whole devil thing. You could just be like, I found God now. I believe in Jesus. Like, it's I don't know. Like,
I mean, I feel like saying the devil got a hold of you is not as effective as like, even like an insanity defense is really hard to pull off. The devil got a hold of me is basically tantamount to an insanity defense, and like not as like, yeah, it's basically like a form of that. Like, demonic possession is not a recognized legal category, like, in the American legal system now. Historically it didn't like really get you out of punishment. The
devil made me do it.
The idea is that you would have to like be considered insane or not competent and not responsible for your actions. That would be the only way that it would like lighten your sentence. So I think it works maybe strategy.
But I think it's worth noting that I think at least a few of the people that like Geraldo interviewed from jail, that had admitted to sort of like, becoming a Satanist and wanting to do crimes for Satan, etc., had already been convicted, right? So, I mean, maybe you could argue that this is like a clemency, like I want to get, maybe paroled off of death row or commuted to life, there's a bunch of people saying like there's also cases where like people did it and then like, remember there was that kid in New Jersey, I think, that killed his mom and then piled all of his like occult books like in a pile in the middle of his house and then like set them on fire and like stabbed himself and like burned his house down, like that. There was cases like that. And again, I'm not trying to be I'm not coming at this from a crazy like Christian angle and like the spiritual warfare, but I don't know. At the same time, like, these are things that seem to have actually happened. And Aquino was one of the most prominent Satanists in the country, a man who had probably, if not directly killed in Vietnam, was, a party to lots of killing, right?
Yeah.
And was interested in the darkest side of, like, the left-hand path magical tradition, and could often like would make a spirited intellectual defense of things that some might consider quote unquote
evil. He did also,
evil.
Lest we forget, he did also argue very fiercely with David Myatt about like human sacrifice and that like, against the use of human sacrifice.
We do forget that he was the lib in that like conversation.
He was the lib, yeah.
He was the woke lib.
Yeah, he definitely like lost the like, the hardcore points. He definitely put himself out there, to look maybe less cool to potential Satanist recruits because he he had to take the,
right.
you know, the modern
but also,
position.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's a good point. But then again, this complicates it a little bit. When were those letters written? I recall.
Oh, you think he he did this human sacrifice and then like he was filled with regret and he was like, it's not worth it.
No, not at all, not at all.
Okay,
But like, if I recall correctly, these letters were like the very early '90s, right? Weren't they like the early '90s?
So long ago, I don't even
or late
remember.
'80s.
Probably, yeah.
It was after,
I
in
think
other
it was
words,
around the '90s. Yeah.
it was after the Presidio scandal and his appearances on American television as like this spooky Satanist guy. He was like defending himself against a witch hunt, and it did as we read about, like it interrupted his army career. The Army CID refused to clear him, like clear the investigative records completely of the investigation into child abuse at his home and at the Presidio, because they found that his alibis were, quote, not credible, like about like not being in San Francisco at the time, like he was lying to them. So his career got kind of topped out at lieutenant colonel, and then that's when he wrote the book Extreme Prejudice and claimed that there was like an anti-satanic, bigoted like Christian, plot to like throw him out. So during this period, he was going on national television trying to like represent, as weird as he was, like kind of trying to present like this intellectual, respectable Satanist position that like we never break any laws, and like if you can find these people, like get them off the streets, like he was playing into kind of like, I'm a law-abiding American, I'm an army officer, like I'm a smart, interesting guy.
I think he kind of believed in that though. Like, I don't think that was necessarily like a facade, and that really like he supported like, I don't know, like like ripping people's heads off and drinking their blood. He wanted like, the like sophisticated, like equally satanic, like imperial form of like clean and civilized warfare, like we saw in Vietnam. Like
well,
that,
it just makes me think that might be the case. I don't know. Like, was he, not a real one in the sense of like really being like a Satanist sicko that would contemplate doing human sacrifice? I don't know.
I mean, the only like indication of that, I guess there would be, like the broader like Presidio scandal, which like implicated him in like child abuse, which certainly it's definitely
capable
not,
of that.
So yeah, like in that, like there's definitely like credibility to that. So, and it's not like just like a totally ginned up witch hunt in the way that like he portrayed it to be. Again, it's not like definitively proven, but it's still, like it's also not an absurdity.
No.
By any
just
means.
the way that he would always defend himself in that, and he would always invoke that it's so ridiculous because I was stationed in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I was stationed in Missouri. I was stationed here. I was going to the National Defense College, blah, 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 blah. Like, he always throws all that out there. Never once mentions, I'm from San Francisco. I come from a rich-ass family that has a gigantic house in, like, around on Russian Hill. And, like, obviously, like, if I get, like, a weekend leave, I could just go to my house in San, like, where else would you go? If you're like, if you're off duty, like you could go there.
Yeah,
Presumably,
and, like,
maybe Lilith
aspects
was
of his
living there
house, like,
full-time.
and it wasn't like beyond the point that would seem to me to be like pure coincidence. Like, certainly, like, immediately when you're like, oh, she described elements of his house, it's like, well, houses can be kind of similar. But in that case, like, didn't she describe like that there were like lion's foot, like legs on a couch or something like that? Which, like, that's not like
they identified specific things about the color of the room,
like,
and like the shape of the house, and
yeah,
I mean that's the thing too. Is
that
like,
is
he
like
makes
a
it
feature that like more than one couch in the world has, but still is very specific. And like,
and
I think
also
it was weird enough people noticed it.
But also like the omission of the fact that he owns this like house, and I think it had passed into his total ownership because his mom died, I think, in 1985, right before this scandal. Is that it makes it sound otherwise like a kind of like wacky McMartin thing where it's like, oh, he kidnapped us and took us to a crazy house and like blah blah blah, and then all these crazy things happen there, and he's like, oh come on, I'm just like an army guy, like how do I have a house? That's ridiculous. Like, what is this, a movie? But then you think about it, it's like, actually he does live in a gigantic creepy house. Like, it's painted all black, and it's like an old Victorian.
Walls on the side were painted black. Yeah,
it's
which
an
like is not
imposing old Victorian
what,
manor,
like,
basically.
Yeah, I mean, I get like, again, like,
and they
it's hard,
described it pretty accurately. The kids,
yeah.
You know,
I mean,
so like, you know, but it's still, I don't know, you know, if he's capable of that. Obviously, not every pedophile is necessarily going to also be a ritualistic murderer.
I mean, that certainly would like makes it much likelier.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you know, again, when like your entire like life philosophy like nakedly is about like how like your will determines everything, and like you're, you know, beyond good and evil, and like, you know, I mean, like, you know, then like, and how like, you know, you're satanic and you embrace like the very like representation of like everything that has been associated like historically, you know, at least for like thousands of years with like evil, like in order to be intentionally provocative and to like, you know, shape yourself into a representation of evil to the average person. You know, I mean, compare with Alice Bailey. Like when Alice Bailey, like, I guess, quote unquote, realized that like a lot of people like thought of Lucifer as an epithet of Satan. Like she was like, okay, well, we can't call the magazine this anymore. Quino was exactly the opposite. Like he wanted people to associate him with Satan and with evil. And so like when, you know, your entire public persona is about like how you embrace evil and like you know,
evil is good, actually.
Yeah, evil is actually good. And like, you know, of course you could go down we talked about this in our episodes about him extensively, but then it kind of like makes it difficult for people to like believe you, or to like you know, to think that like what you're saying, you know, about how you repudiate violence and things like that, it makes it like conceivable that, okay, well, you know, is this all just like one massive lie? And like I understand how like you can kind of put you know, to your point about like not wanting to be like a crazy like satanic panic person, like I understand how like any group can, like, you know, for instance, I'm Muslim, like I think about how there's many like right-wing Americans who are like, Taqiyya, you know, like anything a Muslim says is a lie, like Taqiyya, you know, like, but on the other hand, like Muslims like worship God, and like truth is actually like one of our values, you know, like al-Haq is like one of the names of God. Like we don't worship the Prince of Lies, like we don't like proudly come out there and say like we love lies and darkness. Like that is like a misapprehension by bigoted people. Like it's not something that like we, you know, I do agree that it's not nothing. I do agree that it has an effect, that it's not like, it's not insane to consider that when you're talking about, again, like all this evidence is very circumstantial. Although I'm reading this article that, you know, the Steely Damp Man included from 1976. That's like a, you know, kind of partially an interview with Aquino. And he does say that, or sorry, no, it's not him. It's Lilith, who was later Lilith Aquino, at this time Lilith Sinclair. The magician looks for complete circles. He fits round pegs into round holes. Magic is a form of applied speculation. So if we're being speculative, we can't really be criticized.
We are doing applied speculation.
Yeah, we are doing definitely being very, very speculative. But I mean, this whole interview is pretty interesting. Translated into layman's terms, this means that the magician may focus his will toward a desired end, such as a curse or a cure, or he can, according to commentaries on the Book of Coming Forth by Night, alter the laws of the mechanical universe. Hence, it is an attempt to commit the same crime against God as did the Set entity by rebelling against the Creator. Once the Setian can alter the laws of the universe, he sees light through darkness. So, like, you know, again, like, that's all about how, like, beyond good and evil, I can alter the laws of the universe. I want to commit crimes against God. And then, like, whining that people consider you evil and don't believe what you say. It's kind of like, well, you know, Yeah. Like,
yeah.
You like are talking. You're pretty
grab
much
the Promethean technology and take it for yourself.
Yes.
Make yourself
On the other
god.
hand, it is it is certainly a point to bear in mind that there are people who don't do that and are still evil. However, like who don't advertise how evil they are and are still evil and actually are good at disguising it. But yeah,
you can't. We never forget about the Munafiq. The Munafiqs are out there of various religions, and even just of like the secular variety. There are Munafiqs who and obviously that's just about as bad, sometimes worse than just the outright Satanist, like somebody who like I think we talked about like the Kingston family.
The Munafiq is
like
worse.
Like the Kingston family is satanic.
Yeah,
that's how I'm calling it. Like they are like deeply evil, and I think the fact that they drape themselves in like godly language and prophecies of Jesus and like invoking Jesus to do what they do is like extreme sicko shit. It's almost less sicko if somebody's like, hail Satan, bleh, do crime. Like, it's like at least like, okay, well, that's what they believe in. But like the deception aspect, like the false representation and the hypocrisy, which, has to be corrosive to one's spirit if you like build your entire life off of it, like some of these, corrupt mega preacher type of people do. Or these like, bloodthirsty Zionist like IDF rabbis that are like co-signing genocide and like invoking God and all these other things that, invoking kind of like good concepts to like justify something deeply evil. Yeah, that's all. I mean, it's a major feature of our world,
Mm-hmm.
But there are also people that it doesn't, because those people are hypocrites. We've always said this. It doesn't mean that people who run around like I'm bad, like are automatically good.
No, it doesn't.
You know what I mean? Like I'm a
Nor
sicko.
does it mean that like you need to embrace evil because someone that's like, again, we talked about this before. It's like usually the strategy is to be like, no, like actually like this is like good. This is like, whatever your like ground of good and bad is, assuming you have one, which most people do, then like you're saying, no, this is in line with like morality, like what I'm doing is good, rather than say like, yeah, you're right, I'm bad. And like, then like that's exactly the opposite of like you're kind of like setting whatever your cause is backwards by like saying like, yeah, I am satanic or like that is just a synonym for evil. And just like you don't want to say that you're evil, like you want to argue that you're good. I don't know. I just feel like, I mean, it's a broader subject, but it's kind of like, in a way, like relinquishing a common language. And I don't understand. Like, I mean, it goes back to the thing, like, I don't understand what the appeal of Satan is. I know what people are like, well, it's all about freedom and it's about like, like the resistance of like tyranny or like the human spirit. It's like Satan hates the human spirit. I'm sorry. Like, that's Satan despises humanity. He's the ultimate enemy of humanity. He wants all humanity to be destroyed. Like, why? Like, it doesn't make, you've just made up a character who is like really just an expression of like yourself and like the values that you aspire to, like freedom. Like that's, that's a good value. That's not a satanic value. I don't know. That's just my point. That's my take.
Yeah.
I'm sure people up there are, they're shooting smoke and hellfire out of their ears, hearing me say that. But
no, but
yeah,
we're nothing if not thorough in our analysis of the various satanic currents. I think, I think we've been pretty good about it, and it's not our favorite thing in the world. That's okay.
No, we have been identified as an anti-Satan podcast from day one, and
right.
I stand for my position that the devil is bad.
We're upholding the Red Green Alliance because who else didn't like stuff. It's like Satan, the Soviet Union, and maybe they had a reason for it. They were Tipper Goring from the far left.
Someone says it makes somewhat more sense, and sorry, in the live chat they say it makes somewhat more sense if you assume someone has a Gnostic paradigm for it. I mean, yeah, like that is kind of the idea, like that. Again, this is sort of like reformulating what like this meaning of Satan is in a way, where like you have the god of this world is the demiurge, right? Not really the ultimate god, but like a sub creator, right? That's created a fallen world, and there is like actually a higher, like in a way, like the god of this world, like it actually is kind of like almost an evangelical idea, like the god of this world is Satan,
Yeah.
But
you could look at it that way, that like the people they call Jehovah or quote unquote God, that's actually like who they think, like that's Satan actually, and there's like a bigger, vaster God like beyond that. But the ruler of this world is like a sus little demiurge that tricks everybody into thinking they're like the one true God. But they're actually Yaldabaoth and they're blind.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, I mean,
like
in the Gnostic framework, like, and I mean, this is kind of like more broadly true. Like, if you believe in like one God and you believe in like a creator, like God created Satan, and like God could annihilate Satan at any time. Like, why does God allow Satan to exist? You can think of many explanations for that, but that kind of gets to the point, like, okay, in some way, if we consider like what is good to be what God wills, then like Satan's existence is good on an ontological level, but like bad on like a level of lower ontological priority. Like I talked about this like when we in Tank Magazine, we talked about the problem of evil. They're like he's bad. Like there's a different level of where like an ethical and moral level where Satan is bad relative to our existence as human beings, but his existence, if we define like what is good as what God wills,
you could say is necessary for
like
reality to be the way it is.
Deemed
like,
necessary. Yeah, it's like again, that's like this is part of the reason why I'm Muslim, is because I think that like the idea that God became I never liked the idea that God became a man. I'm sorry, this is kind of getting off as a spookiness of this episode, but I never liked that because I feel like it encourages people to do something which is like this thing of like, which is in some ways kind of satanic, with kind of a satanic impulse, which is like, if I were God, I would do this. If I were God, I wouldn't kill people, make people like die of cancer. If I were God, I would which like is applying sort of a human moral principle to God. Like yes, of course, like it's wrong to murder. So, like, if a human being is, like, sitting in a control room of the universe and is like, I want that person to die, then it seems, like, kind of cruel and wrong to do that. But God isn't a human being. God is, there's nothing like his likeness, like, you can't really think of it in that way, So it's, like, kind of, like, God actually is the determinant of what is like good and bad. God is like above all those things, not human beings.
Satan, in other words, Satan's a little bit like an undercover cop who's like trying to,
it's part of exactly. Yeah, it's part. Yeah, it's it's like Job, like all these things. It's like it's part of a grander design. I mean, like really, Jen, her point, Satan is self-hatred. In a way, but a lot of the time Satan is identified with with the self, with the ego. So when it's funny, this is a funny thing that I think a lot of modern day Satanists, I've mentioned this on the show before, but it's something a lot of modern day Satanists don't realize when they're like, well, we don't really believe in the devil. We believe that the devil is your own self-actualization, your own self-potential. And that's Aquino has more of an occult or esoteric version of that. And, that there's the LaVeyan version of that where it's kind of like a metaphor, even though there is a little bit of ritual magic and LaVeyanism. But anyway, their whole thing is this is about exalting the self. It's if, you look at what, sophisticated religious thinkers, even 1,000 years ago, even 1,500 years ago, have to say about Satan, they'll say something very similar, that Satan is about the temptations of the self and the temptations of the ego. And giving in to one's own desires and concupiscence and lusts and will, or their sort of their base desires or what's low within them. So that is it's interesting because they kind of think they've reframed it or something into being about exalting the human being, but really they're just kind of
not in a good way.
But I'm just sorry. I know I'm going into the chat a little bit, but
no,
so I'm
guessing,
okay.
It's okay. We got talking in the chat.
No, I mean that's interesting, but yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Maybe I kind of bumped up one of the questions because we referenced it already, and we're a little shorter on time. But maybe we want to switch to it because it also has a religious dimension. It's kind of related to. It's tangentially related to all the questions today. This is you can read this. The one from Gingy.
I am wondering the host's opinions on the Jesuit question. Maybe not the best way to term it. This is from Gingy00. There has been some recent discussion in the Christianity channel on this, and I am wondering if the hosts have any opinions or information on what makes a Jesuit such a focus for the conspiracy-minded, especially since Francis is only the first Jesuit pope. What sets this group as the main focus for many people when examining sus aspects of the church, when there are a plethora of other potentially sus holy orders in the Catholic Church or lay groups like Opus Dei? I mean, this is gonna
That's a really good question.
Yeah, it's gonna sound like maybe a pedestrian answer, but I think that the part of the reason is because what I've always thought, and this probably is one among many factors. I think that even early on, when they chose the name the Society of Jesus, people felt that it was kind of vainglorious in a way, or maybe a little bit audacious to name themselves as their Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
And I think actually the term Jesuit kind of originated as a pejorative term for someone who was invoking the name of Jesus too aggressively, but they took it on, they gave it a positive connotation, they flipped it, they adopted it, kind of like the Democratic donkey or something,
Yeah.
But what I think is really part of the reason for the suspicion of Jesuits even to the present day, these historical, obviously there's many people put many spins on why they suspect the Jesuits or whatever, but I think that historically the seed of it may be that there was a disproportionate number of converts in the Society of Jesus, converts from Islam and Judaism, because this is an order that originates in Spain, right? Ignatius of Loyola is a Castilian guy, and so that, of course, very not too long ago you had the Reconquista, and there were still a lot of people who were whether they actually were genuine converts or they were actually crypto Muslims or crypto Jews. They were definitely they were definitely suspected,
Right.
Even though the founders of the Jesuit order were, I think heritage Catholics or whatever, to put it in modern American right-wing terms. But I think that, there was definitely a big presence of, people from Jewish familial background or Muslim familial background in the Jesuit order, attracted conversos and stuff. So I think that might be the reason why the order was in addition to the sort of the name Society of Jesus, maybe provoking a little bit
that's an interesting point actually that I sort of hadn't thought too much about before in terms of they're separate status, because they definitely were on the forefront of international evangelization, in the 15 to the 1700s. And I mean that they always have this kind of, I don't know, separateness. Even I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school, and even within my own family of relatives, people that are way more, devout or whatever, that went to church and everything like that. Even sometimes them the most were a little bit sussed out by Jesuits. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, they'd say comments about oh, that college, I don't know if so and so should go there. That's a Jesuit school, and it's a little I don't know about these Jesuits, but they are, most people interact with them in modern times, in America through the education system, right? We have some big Jesuit institutions like Georgetown University, a lot of prep high school prep schools, other colleges. I forget if Fordham is a Jesuit school, but there many of them around the country. A lot of them are relatively, some of them are relatively prestigious, and the schools were always seen as if you had a Jesuit Catholic school, a primary school, that's the other thing that's really fascinating, from my vantage point, around, from our generation's vantage point, is even the way my parents talk about Jesuits, it seems very different from the way Jesuits are perceived today. And it wasn't that long of a, not that much of a time difference.
Yeah, I mean,
a few decades. Yeah. For my parents' generation and grandparents' generation, Jesuit was synonymous with extremely disciplined and hardcore and strict. You'd have these
Mm-hmm.
Jesuit priests that would be teachers, and of course, back in the old days, they would beat you up in class, or they lift you up by your lapels and all this other kind of shit. But we're also had a reputation for being kind of very like intellectually educated and a little more like sophisticated. Like they weren't meatheads, but they were like really fierce enforcers of like Catholic faith. But they weren't necessarily uncomfortable with debating, Catholic doctrine versus other types of Christianity or different religions, or like teaching about different religions and stuff like that. And often sometimes having a more like philosophical POV on Catholicism itself, that I could see other Catholics, other like segments of the church being a little bit like, this is a little too like intellectual and like, sus. Like this is almost, they're off doing their own secret like third thing. And then I forget to what extent, I do think that the liberation theologists in like Latin America that were very sympathetic to Marxism in, from like the 1960s to the 80s, a lot of them were Jesuits, and so I think even the Jesuits got somewhat, and even Pope Francis, like he wasn't fully one of those types of priests in Argentina, but he was somewhat sympathetic to like people who were more on that tip, and he was a Jesuit, so I think today people look at them as like these are like a hoity-toity, well-educated order of priests that secretly like love Marxism and like communism and want to kind of make like the church woke and like all this other stuff. And like, they still have the kind of organizational evangelizing impulse to like spread out across the world and bring new people in. But they almost sometimes have like, like Trotskyite or like, I don't know, common form agent or Comintern agent vibes of like, they're doing like front groups. They're doing entryism. They're, like all this kind of stuff. But then they have these like rigorous educational institutions. I don't know. Like, I think.
Even Griffin Kane says in the chat, my grandparents who were cradle Catholics always had aspersions about the Jesuits. According to my mom, her dad thought they were infiltrated by the KGB.
Shit like that. Like they're a little bit distrusted sometimes.
Even the way people talk about, like you were saying, like the way people talk about Francis, like he basically was seen as like, there was like a huge like current, it seemed like, among Catholics like during Francis's papacy. Right. That was like, he's like the seat is vacant and like he's, like an infiltrator. He's like a saboteur. He's like, trying to turn it into a Gaia religion or whatever, like he's trying to, basically he's like the NWO Pope and stuff like that.
Right. And I mean, so it's like hard to square with the kind of stories that like older generations of my family would like kind of tell about the reputation. And I think like my dad went to a Jesuit, I think, high school and college, and, got like full Jesuit education. And like, it's like, they're like it's like a rigorous education and it's strict and everything. But like, there is this kind of vibe of like being afraid of them. And then contrasting it with like, every time I see somebody with SJ, funny, we share the initials.
Yeah, it's true.
With SJ next to their name on Twitter, it's always like Reverend, like, like Reverend Woke McGee, like, the most like
true.
woke priest you've ever seen in your fucking life, like talking about how like God loves everybody, and they're like, they go about as far to the line that you can go in the Catholic Church without getting in trouble in terms of being like liberal, progressive, like they're always working with like kind of pro-immigrant groups and all this kind of stuff. So like now they've been polarized to have this like, right wing kind of trad caths like look at them as like, oh, they're infiltrated by like leftists and like they're sus, and that was the big gripe with like Francis, is that, he was coming in there and he was going to like wokeify everything and stuff. And somehow their like brutal reputation is almost like the deep state, like counterintelligence, like, subversive operations bureau of like the Catholic Church, is, all that stuff's kind of forgotten, and now they're just like the woke order, within the church. So it's like, it's funny how they kind of shapeshift, at least in the American context, they kind of like shapeshifted in that way. Or like, I don't know if there's still kind of like even tendencies within the Jesuits that, maybe there's a right wing and a left wing of the Jesuits that kind of do different stuff and they don't always agree. But genuinely, you put them on a map with like Opus Dei, Knights of Malta are like far to the right, in terms of its political connections across the world. The Jesuits have moved more to like but they're also, operating in the global South a lot historically, right?
Yeah. True.
Like that they're a big order that goes out and tries to like, build schools, bring people, then people send their kids to those schools. They had one of the Jesuits had that famous quote of like, give me the boy for like, 5 hours a day and like, I'll give you the man.
Yeah. I mean, they always like really emphasize like education, like hard as a big part of it. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know, like but then, they do become, I think if you're going to try to point, especially if you're kind of like a right leaning or maybe, historically a more nativist kind of conspiracy theorist in America, your easiest target is the Jesuits in terms of like, they're up to something, in terms of the other orders are a little more like obscure, and don't have as much of a strong, identity that is like popularly known. I feel like even a lot of non-Catholics know what Jesuits are vaguely, whereas if you're like, well, what about like the Franciscans and the Dominicans, like not as many people know what they're all about. I even like struggle a little bit to say like what they're like, how to specifically define those orders, but nonetheless, like they have been, I don't know, a part of the conspiracy culture around Catholics, even within Catholic communities. Like they're definitely the group that people are most sussed out by. But to be fair, I know people that are still Catholic that are very sussed out by like Opus Dei and are just like, oh yeah, they're fucking sinister. Like they're up to something. You know what I mean? And I mean, I'm more interested in terms of like the late 20th century and this century. I think the Jesuits are interesting, but I feel like the most dangerous forces are happening in that kind of Knights of Malta, Opus Dei milieu. Like Opus Dei is all up in Silicon Valley, in kind of the judicial system, probably. I forget if any of the Supreme Court justices were like actually with Opus Dei, like Antonin Scalia or something like that. But I think some of them definitely flirted with it.
Yeah. Yes, I'm not sure, like, if, Scalia was Opus Dei. He may have been. That does sound, like, familiar to me in some way.
And also this Federalist Society guy, Leonard Leo, who people talk about sometimes as being, like, this is the guy who engineered Trump's, like, all his Supreme Court picks and all of this shit. Like, he's, because I'm pretty sure he's Catholic. Yeah, he's Italian, so he's Catholic.
Scalia? Yeah, Scalia's...
not Scalia. Obviously Scalia is, but Leonard Leo, the conservative legal activist who is very influential in like Trump's judicial picks. And I've seen some people argue that like he's very instrumental, like behind the scenes in like, he's a knight of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. So yeah, he's a knight of Malta that engineered like the last three, Trump Supreme Court picks and, got Roe v. Wade overturned and, the kind of one person that you might be able to like point to is like why we have this like ultra right wing kind of like originalist, Supreme Court right now. He's a Knight of Malta, which is cool. I was reading an article today. Do you remember when Seymour Hersh wrote an article about how there was like a cabal of like Knights of Malta people inside of I think it was primarily the Pentagon. This is like during the first term of Obama, and he wrote it for the New Yorker, and like everyone got super mad and like canceled him, and like he like couldn't publish anywhere anymore.
I'm not sure if I do remember.
I was just reminded by it from the episode we were doing the other day about the Kingston family and like the Kurds and stuff. I found this like 2006 article that by Hersh that was dishing on like the power struggle in like the Bush administration and how like Rumsfeld had just been forced out, and the Robert Gates, Brent Scowcroft, George H.W. Bush like cabal was like pushing out, like sidelining Cheney because like they had a different opinion about Iraq or something. But like it seemed like the way he was reporting it that Cheney was already gearing up for like a war with Iran in like 2006, but they weren't able to quite get there before the economic crisis and everything. But it mentioned like that according to Hersh that there isn't a PKK affiliate in Iran. I am kind of forgetting right now what their acronym is. I think it's like the Peace of Life like party or something like that. The Kurdistan Life Party, I want to say. There's several factions, but one of them is like the YPG, like literally a branch of the PKK.
Yeah, it's PJAK, the Partiya Giana Azadi Kurdistani, the Kurdistan Free Life Party. Yeah.
Yeah, I looked on their website, like celebrating like the, woman life freedom revolution and blah blah blah, and like I remember people like attacked me when I said that, like, oh, they're chanting the PKK slogan and like, oh, they're just Kurds who are inspired. Shut up, And then I looked and it's like literally first line is like, this slogan was taken from the great Abdullah Öcalan, like, who like outlined woman life freedom and blah blah. And they're basically just an affiliate of, but they're in Iran. And Seymour Hersh reported in 2006 that I think like the general secretary was flown to Washington D.C. and lobbied like members of like the Bush administration and people in the government to like start supporting his party in Iran, and also that American and Israeli like military trainers had reached some kind of agreement to start arming and training and equipping the Iranian arm of the PKK in advance of a potential war on Iran. So like we didn't know that when we were recording the other episode about like, remember I was speculating like maybe they'll get some of these like YPG guys now that they're sort of done in Syria to like hop over, and then the people that are trained up in those mountains by the border, like they there's 4 branches that are all just like the PKK, like they have a Turkish branch, Syrian, Iraqi, and Iranian.
I mean, that article
and they're all
that
the
we
same
discussed from
force,
like
basically.
2018, is basically talking about like these groups that like want to cultivate like Kurdish resistance to Iran. They're like going out to Washington.
Yeah.
You're like,
And though though the Israeli officials that Hersh talked to vehemently denied this happening, the reports that Hersh heard said that Israel was providing support to basically the PKK in 2006, like a long time before the Syrian civil war started. And it seems like both parties have kept that very quiet over the years.
Yeah, they're not necessarily like proud of it. It like kind of goes against like and also Israel's incredibly like unpopular in Syria and the Levant in general, like outside of course Israel itself.
Which is why everybody had to like be really quiet about it, and they quietly flew the general secretary to Washington for talks, and it's but that was the kind of spice you're getting out of a 2000s like New Yorker Seymour Hersh dispatch, and then he says one thing about the Knights of Malta, and then boom, get the fuck out of here. I mean, I think some of his reporting is a little bit like, I found it a little if hit or miss on the current Gaza situation, because he still publishes these kind of insider dispatches on Substack. But I think everyone made fun of him about the Knights of Malta thing, but it's not so funny now, isn't it? Like, is it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think there might be something worth pointing out. Like the Knights of Malta, I mean, they have their own passports, their own diplomatic passports. They're international. Like, they're highly integrated with like military intelligence services and business people all around the world. Like, they have a natural kind of walkable base to sort of work with. And it's unclear whether this new Pope, Leo the 12th, is that what he is?
No, I think it's Leo the 14th.
Leo the 14th, right? It's like I haven't heard anything from him. He became Pope, and then I don't know. I guess I haven't been paying close enough attention.
He's like been like kind of like, he's basically like kind of towing the Francis line, but like a little bit more tepidly.
Right.
He recently offered to like give, like, I remember he had some interaction with Greta's flotilla recently, where he was saying like, oh, I'll bring it to Gaza like safely, but they like rejected it, and like there was some controversy over whether like he should have done that because he was kind of like setting them up to like be portrayed as like unreasonable when like would have actually gotten there, because like Israel was like, oh, we'll peacefully bring it and then like shoot everybody who tries to come get it, but and then so the Pope was like, oh, let me do it, and like people were saying, oh, it feeds into this idea that they're unreasonable, like blah blah. But I mean, he has like he hasn't been like like out there like taking the opposite stance to Francis, but he's not quite he's a little bit. Yeah, he's like a more tepid version of Francis from what I've seen.
Right. I found like some kind of nuncia whatever letter from like 2022 that, or maybe 2023, where Francis like ordered a bunch of like the reorganization of the Knights of Malta. And I think one reform that he did was that for the first time, members can join for the Knights of Malta that aren't from like hereditary bloodlines, because that was, I guess, a fucking requirement. Like up until 2023, that you had to have some kind of like nobility or like noble lineage to become like a full Knight of Malta. But I guess now technically you could. I mean, there were other orders that like people who weren't born hoity-toity could join, but the Knights of Malta, like that's pretty gatekept actually. I think to have, because there were Americans in that group. I think George Bush was a Knight of Malta. I think William Casey. Well, they probably did make exceptions for people like William Casey. Like if you're powerful enough, because like William Casey he's just an Irish guy, but yeah, it seemed like he was doing some. I remember reading about like some kind of little war going on between Francis, the Jesuit, and the Knights of Malta. Like he was trying to put more church control over their activities, and they were like resisting that. And then I think he fired all the leaders, like the Grand Master and all the leaders, and like formed a new council. So I don't know who is running it right now, but it's definitely like a new generation. And yeah, I don't know how far that goes, but I know that, you know, that right wing of the Catholic Church has done some pretty shady shit just in the last century.
I was looking up for Scalia Opus Dei. I guess he was not officially Opus Dei, but he had like strong Opus Dei, or you know, someone's saying in the chat is saying Spartak Silverhand is saying Scalia was definitely Opus Dei. It's not confirmed like openly, but he definitely had like a lot of connections with them. I found this crazy story in the National Catholic
too, maybe.
Yeah, I found this story in the National Catholic Register that's like sort of describing this this book that came out, Scalia, by James Rosen. It says, back in 1959, when a young Catholic medical student announced that he was leaving his professional studies to join Opus Dei and become a priest, his shocked parents called in both a trusted Jesuit priest and a 22-year-old former classmate from their son's Catholic high school. The classmate was Antonin Nino Scalia, and he soon showed up at the Connor home in Queens, New York, for a heart-to-heart with his friend. Bob Connor shared his plans for entering Opus Dei and then asked what Nino was going to do with his life. "I am going to the Supreme Court," Scalia replied, while noting his immediate goal of working in the Washington, D.C. offices of Jones Day, a top law firm. "I will be sent to Washington," he added, "and I will rise."
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Yeah,
no, they have like they're scarily infiltrated into all of like the top like white shoe law firms and like VC companies, and like, you know, they clerk for Supreme Court justices. Like they're definitely marching through the institutions. These Opus Dei.
Well, yeah, I mean that's
people.
basically the integralist
back to high school
program. Yeah, I mean
right.
Catholics definitely do have like, I guess maybe because of the legal tradition, but they definitely have like a disproportionate like presence in like American legal institutions. I guess they're just drawn to it, you know. It's one of those things. Yeah, it's kind of like what's like, why are there so many Jews in Hollywood? It's like, well, I mean, I guess there's a lot of Jews in the legal profession as well, but it's true of Catholics too. Like they're, you know, they tend to gravitate towards.
Oh, there's a shitload of Catholics in the legal profession for sure. Yeah, the Jesuits like train them. You know, they train them well to, you know, kind of like understand hierarchies and obey and like use logic, and then like, you know, work in complex like bureaucracies and shit like that. Yeah. Well, okay. This is actually wild. I was looking at who is the current patron of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, and since 2023, when that organization happened from Francis, it is Gianfranco Ghirlanda. Gianfranco Ghirlanda. SJ. He put a Jesuit in charge of the Knights of Malta. The plot thickens.
That is something that I have heard about Francis, is that like, you know, one of the critiques I've heard of him is that he's kind of like partial to Jesuits. I mean, I guess it makes sense.
That was always the people kind of assumed that, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, he replaced actually the American leader of the Order of Malta, Raymond Leo Burke. Be funny to know if he had he's a cousin of like Leonard Leo. That'd be funny. But I guess not. Like he was the long time, I think, leader from 2014 to 2023. So for 9 years, he was the Archbishop of St. Louis before that, and the Bishop of La Crosse, Wisconsin in the 90s. And he is like a fierce like defender of like the Tridentine Mass and is like basically like a trad Catholic right wing guy. So Francis replaced him with a Jesuit, which is like does seem like some kind of power play was going on there. I don't know exactly. I think Burke was like he was always in the news a lot actually, like kind of against LGBT stuff. I think he was the one that said that like Democrats that are pro-choice like should be denied communion if they're Catholic,
Yeah.
Like remember that when he's like Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden like can't get communion or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, not in my diocese, So he was like a big kind of this like big tough guy, like right winger, like Catholic bishop that I think probably had like very tight ties with like the American political figures on the right and stuff like that. And so it's not surprising that the Knights of Malta would be kind of like generally associated with that kind of like right-wing Catholic thing. But I wonder like how much does it change when there's a Jesuit in charge? Like it's still kind of obscure. Like the actual, I don't know, activities they engage in. They do, charity things in conflict regions, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I don't exactly know. The Catholic Church is, it resists easy understanding due to its vastness, its, sort of Byzantine bureaucratic structure and its secrecy. It's like it's kind of a tough nut to crack sometimes. It's also such a big apparatus that sometimes there are multiple currents like battling within the Catholic Church to like kind of use its influence to nudge things in a certain direction. I think like in the 20th century, anti-communism became kind of like an overriding kind of objective like that sort of united everybody. But I think there's also certain points of like disagreement. And there's definitely like an extra fasci wing of the Catholic Church that is probably pretty tied in with like the Peter Thiel world, I would be willing to guess, and like J.D. Vance. Like that,
I mean, definitely there's like a faction that
the integralists.
Even like that, those people, there's probably like within that group, like an even further like fringe. And yeah, I mean, it's like, there definitely are a lot of dimensions to it. It's definitely not like a monolithic institution at all. It's very interesting, and it is interesting how it like, it's it's incredibly old. I mean, it's like, I mean, I'm interested in religion, so obviously like I find it, interesting to learn about. And it is like, the fact that it kind of, I mean, it's a little bit exaggerated, like how true this is, but it does have like a little bit of like institutional consistency, like over, like 2,000 years. I mean, again, that is like very much exaggerated, but it is an interesting thing, to kind of, like when the new pope was, elected or whatever they call it, like anointed, convoked, like whatever. I did like it, I was interested to learn about Pope Leo and the Pope Leo the 13th and like what his name might mean and all of that stuff.
Right.
It yeah.
I forgot. Is he a 13th? That's a little bit.
Well, he's Pope Leo the 14th.
14th. Okay.
Yeah, before that was.
Yeah. So I mean, also, like Protestants are going to Protestant in America. They're afraid of Catholics, and I think that's why some of it still sticks in like into the lore of like the QAnons and the kind of like Alex Jones type conspiracies. Though I feel like it's less so now because these other Catholic like factions like Opus Dei or Knights of Malta seem to be so active with like the new American right.
It's interesting how like it's become like kind of, I actually like not too long ago, of course we all know about the death of Charlie Kirk and everything. And like, just because like, I feel like it's kind of like starting to abate a little bit, but for like a little while, like your whole social media feed was just like wall to wall clips of Charlie Kirk. And one of them that I saw was a clip of him talking about how like, it was actually kind of funny. 'Cause like, there's that meme that whenever someone dies, like people are always posting saying like he accepted the light of Islam in his deathbed. His last words were like, but people kind of did that like with Charlie Kirk and Catholicism, and try to say like, he was about to embrace Catholicism. But yeah, someone posted a clip of him like actually, to say like, no, he wasn't, and he was kind of talking about how like, the sort of the Mary reverence and the idea that Mary didn't have sin, and that upset him because we all sin except for Jesus. Like Mary did sin. And also like there was some of the transubstantiation, he didn't believe in it. I forget what his third point was. It was Mary transubstantiation. Of course, like the institution of the papacy itself.
Yeah, the Pope.
The like infallibility of the Pope under certain conditions. But his broader point was like, I love Catholics, I'm like, but in a way, like, it is like we were just saying in the episode about Kingston and Michael Flynn that like they're like certainly there still is a current in like American evangelicalism doesn't consider Catholics this thing of like Christians and Catholic like that type that still definitely exists, but on the other hand like there is kind of this like ecumenicalism as well where it's like we're Christian like that where the differences between them are elided when like you think like if religion or like is such a big part of this, then like almost that would be like one of the most important. It's interesting, like they're so focused on like this makes sense too in a way where it's like the atheistic leftist scourge or Muslims obviously who Charlie Kirk hated and things like that, and who many on the American right hate and etc. But you would almost think that it could go the other way, as it often does in groups like that, where it's like, okay, well, if the only way to salvation and the only way to be upon truth is through Christ, as J.D. Vance said in his weird guest hosting spot. Remember that where he was like, it was very strange, but like there's that one point where he says like he basically recited the Nicene Creed and said like unity in this country is possible but can only be based on truth, and that is and I'm like, wait a minute, like if you're equating truth equals this, then like are you saying you? But anyway, whatever. Like obviously we know what he thinks, but like my point is that like really like the beliefs among Christians about like the nature of Christ and God and how like that would almost be the most important thing. Like actually like not like creating the strategic alliance, like that's like actually kind of like a path down into darkness, like to sort of say it's okay like and that we're an alliance with these, like that's like the most deceptive thing because like it has all these
are you encouraging them to
let them fight.
To struggle against.
Well, I'm just saying that, like,
survive. No, nothing.
Well, like the same thing like happens in Islam. Like the like traditionalists or like parentheses neo-traditionalists, and traditionalists in general versus Salafis, Sunni versus Shia. Like God knows that like those fights are like active, as much, if not more so, than the fights among, between Muslims and non-Muslims. So
between non-believers.
Yeah.
So you think they should clean up their own house first, and they should settle the beef once and for all?
Well, I guess I'm not saying what I think they should do, because I'm I guess I should take my own advice because I would be pissed off. I get pissed off when non-Muslims try to tell Muslims what to do. So I guess I'm not telling them what they should do, but I guess I'm saying that like maybe I'm saying I think it's inevitable that is what will happen.
Right. Yeah. That's bound to happen sooner or later.
Yeah.
Like this tactical alliance can only go so far before, like they get mad over like the first principles again. Because there is I don't know. On the one hand, American Catholics have integrated like pretty far to the extent that like Michael Flynn is just yelling Elizabeth Clare Prophet quotes that he stole, and still calls himself a Catholic. Like there's definitely been some like melding, and like adaptation. But at the same time, there still are certain like differences that that are different from like the American Protestant like approach to religion, that rely on like a distant ancient bureaucracy like 6,000 miles away and like an old man in a big hat and
right,
you know,
the
like a shadowy institution.
Popagators, you know,
Yeah,
coming
the
to our shores.
Popegators.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like right, that they're made uncomfortable by that. But then, you know, let's not forget, especially after this weekend, now people are speculating about, you know, the Mormon evangelical deep state war that's also raging.
Right, yeah, we
where
just had
they're
this kind
hitting
of
each
flare
other's
up.
targets.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Mormons evangelicals almost similarly will have to probably settle their theological disputes at some point. I mean, if the Mormons want to get like more powerful, they'll have to bump up against that and resolve that contradiction a little bit. They can't just do, you know, Mormon tachia all day and, you know, pretend like we're just like Christians. You know, it's like, well, yeah. You know how I am. I call all of them Christian, but
they are Christians. They
definitely
are Christians. I would
like,
say, like,
Christians
well,
plus. I don't know. Like there's like an asterisk there, maybe, because Catholics and Protestants are interpreting the same material. Mormons add something to it and are like, there's also this book of Mormon, you know, and then kind of base off of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, I'm
Makes them
not
a little
denying
different.
that there's differences, but like, I don't know. I guess I would say that yeah, they are Christian.
But it's also deeply American, so
yeah,
another wrinkle in it there. It's like, you know, people have said that Mormonism is the one truly American religion.
Certainly, like they're like by like again, like, you know, I'm not Christian, so like if I were again, but you know, being a Muslim, like I'm not someone who is like out there like takfiring people like willy nilly at all. So like I'm generally like, you know. I basically apply this standard like even within you know, my own religion, but certainly like as an outsider, like you know, anthropologically or whatever, sociologically speaking, I feel like a Christian is someone who says they're a Christian. So, you know,
right,
they definitely
right.
are Christians by that standard.
Take their word for it.
Yeah. Like, because what other possible criteria could you apply? You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess in terms of the final analysis about the Jesuits, I can't say. I'm sure they have been involved in intrigues and conspiracies, probably hundreds, thousands, throughout the last 5 centuries. But I see them primarily as like they're highly adaptive. That's like the specific role they play in the church, and they will like mold themselves in order to fit in a place where Catholic power is not already like deeply entrenched, and they'll like meet people halfway that they're trying to kind of like either convert or just want to like integrate into the society of, and they'll also do that with secular society. Like you could argue that they do that. Like they found like colleges that are like quote unquote like serious colleges. You know, they're not like Liberty University or some shit like that. You know what I mean? Like they do like real academic shit, right? Correct me if I'm wrong as an academic, but like you would probably agree that they're like, you know, these Jesuits, like they're running a tight ship. Like they want to be taken seriously as like they can build like a great, you know, institution that studies science and like the humanities and law and all these other things.
Yeah.
You know, and
I mean, there's a pretty good intellectual tradition within the Catholic Church, like broadly speaking, you know,
right,
like not to be demeaned.
Yeah, and not all colleges, not all Catholic colleges are Jesuit, but probably the most prominent ones are.
Yeah,
and a lot of probably every major metropolitan like area in the United States has like a Jesuit high school that, you know, is has probably been there for a long time and is like, you know, pretty like highly rated academics, whatever. You know, so I think that they blend in, they adapt, and they, you know, they're always like kind of there with like interfaith dialogue shit, you know, and these days like their best function is kind of like the liberal ambassadors of the church that can operate in this more like globalized world, and that's why I think you don't see them as much anymore. That hard, you know, tough, like strict Jesuit, like scary Jesuit. Maybe the scariness is like for if you're within the Catholic community, they're scary. But like then from the outside, they're like the chillest, like, let's talk about philosophy. Like, you know, they're like very like, you know, chill. I don't know. They might have Vatican II might have changed like their approach to education where they don't use physical punishment and shit like that anymore, and they kind of went through like a cultural sea change. I always associated them with like if there was ever going to be a priest in like the Bay Area in like the 90s that was like a hippie, like it would be a Jesuit priest. You know what I mean? Like they were the ones that were like dabbling probably in like Esalen stuff and like New Age things. Like that was what I associated with Jesuit, but they're adapting to their environment. Like in the Bay Area, like they'll lean into that. I think wasn't Daniel Sheehan the sort of like lawyer that did all that UFO stuff? Like, wasn't he heavily connected to the Jesuits? I feel like he was.
Maybe he was at first. I remember he did the Christic Institute eventually.
Yeah. I don't know if Christic Institute had like formal Jesuit connections, but I feel like it. Okay, Christic Institute was a
he was a
interest law firm.
candidate for the Jesuit priesthood, I guess, at one point.
And his partner at the Christic Institute, who founded with him, was William J. Davis, a Jesuit priest. They worked on the Silkwood case, that like nuclear whistleblower scandal, and then they founded the Christic Institute after that. So and then in 1998 it was succeeded by the Romero Institute, named after Archbishop Oscar Romero, who's assassinated by the CIA in El Salvador. I forget if he was a Jesuit, but he was definitely a hero to the Jesuits. So Christic Institute, literally Jesuit, but he was very active as like a left-wing guy, doing like left-wing legal action. They filed civil suit for damages against the KKK and American Nazi Party in 1985, who had killed civil rights demonstrators in the 1979 Greensboro massacre. Yeah. So then they also. This takes it back, though. The Institute was based in Washington, D.C. The Institute received funding from a nationwide network of grassroots donors, as well as organizations like the New World Foundation. Okay, wait, hold on. What is the New World Foundation? Is this going to bring us back to... Actually, it's not as bad as it sounds. It was a left-wing foundation based in New York that was a supporter of Henry Wallace's 1948 presidential campaign. It looks like Anita McCormick Blaine. It looks like left-wing heirs of the McCormick family, which was they were the heirs of industrialist Cyrus Hall McCormick, made this foundation and started funding like left-wing causes, essentially. During the early 60s, their goal was to aid education and promote better intergroup and international relations. During the early 70s, the foundation supported various civil rights and community projects. Hillary Clinton, whom Marion Wright Edelman had mentored, was on the board from 1982 to 1988 and was its chair for some of that time, including 1987. During that time, the foundation gave money to a variety of organizations active in civil rights and other New Left causes, including Christic Institute, Grassroots International, Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, FAIR, and the National Lawyers Guild. By the early 90s, the foundation was giving money to a Silicon Valley group fighting consequences of computer industry toxins, all the while undergoing criticism for being invested in the likes of Louisiana Pacific, Nike, and Philip Morris. Wow. I do remember that. Like Hillary Clinton had a connection to the Christic Institute, and it was through this, the New World Foundation. So there we have like Hillary Clinton, New Left, like NGO people, Jesuits, like they're fighting with Nazis, like interesting, right? Like, I mean, I'm still a little bit, just instinctually a little bit suspicious of Jesuits. At the same time, there have been some Jesuits that have like stood on the right sides of, historical issues.
Yeah. I'm not, I guess at this point, like, it's hard not to be like instinctively suspicious of anyone who's like trying to like convince you of something, or like who is like, has some kind of message. Like, I guess I'm always coming from a stance of like, all right, in this day and age, like, okay, like what, what's your angle here? I don't know. Like, I feel like, I'm kind of like, I guess I'm always prepared for disappointment. So I don't know if but I'm not more suspicious of Jesuits than I am of others.
Right.
I guess
right.
I think it's fair to say, harkening back to our earlier conversation, that I'm more intuitively or more like instinctively suspicious of Satanists than I am of Jesuits. I'll admit that people might be able to tell, but and that might make some people angry. But on an instinctive level, it's but they like that. That's what they want, right?
They want to be hated. They want to be hated. Blah.
Yeah.
They love being hated. Yeah. I guess self-hate at the end of the day, or getting other people to hate you. Hate me. Wow. Christic Institute filed a $24 million lawsuit on behalf of journalists, stating that various individuals were part of a conspiracy responsible for the La Pensa bombing that injured one of the journalists, I guess on the border of Costa Rica and Nicaragua in like 1984. They sued John K. Singlab, Richard V. Secord, Albert Hakim, Thomas Klein, Theodore Shackley, Pablo Escobar, and a bunch of Contra leaders. I mean, like, kind of based. I don't know. Like, that's cool. Who else was suing John K. Singlab for doing Gladio attacks in like Costa Rica besides these wild Jesuits? I mean, sometimes you do have to kind of like take what you can get. And because they have a centuries long mandate, they will always be there somewhere, like there's always going to be a Jesuit popping up, and hopefully they'll be, on this slightly better like side than the Opus Dei freaks. Maybe they're the only thing that can stop them. So
not to keep us here spinning our wheels, but or to derail this back into Aquino. But I feel like we were remiss, or would be remiss, not to mention this one other element of this article that was flagged. This early sort of interview with Aquino, where a big feature of it is that his fixation with Jefferson Starship. And how
really? Because that's in his autobiography. He's obsessed with Jefferson Starship.
Yeah, he's friends with he
somebody.
Feels that the lyrics to this song predicted like the rise of the Temple of Set. I want to ride the tiger. I want to ride the tiger. Very Evelyn. Look to the summer of '75. All the world is gonna come alive. Do you want to ride the tiger?
Oh my God.
Yeah, and then he says the lyrics to Ozymandias also. There's a curtain high on the corner of the sky. Someone's behind it, I don't know who. It might be love, but I'm not quite certain. Childhood's end. You will see things in these years that will ease all your fears and help you build a bridge to the sky. We are not alone. That is, according to this article, it is the description of his devotion to Set.
I mean, I don't know if he's like making up stuff as bits in his autobiography, Ghost Rides, but he brings up, I think, hanging out with Paul Kantner in the 70s at one point.
Loves, yeah.
It's unclear if like that.
I believe that he could have made that happen.
Yeah, because they were just they weren't like the biggest band in the world. Like once they went to Jefferson Starship, they were like, kind of big. But because he was hanging out with LaVey, it's not a shock at all that they would have gotten to know each other. Like LaVey was always hanging out with rockers and shit, right? So at some point, Paul Kantner, I forget whether or not he talked about hanging out with Grace Slick, but I feel like definitely Paul Kantner. Remember that's why I put the that Silver Spoon song at the end of our Aquino episode.
Yeah.
That's like pick it up piece by piece.
Yeah, right.
It's the weirdest fucking song about cannibalism of like ever. And yeah. So I always wondered about that. I didn't realize his love really did go that deep and that far back. I haven't heard this song "Ride the Tiger." I do see it here on YouTube. I wish there's a way. Oh, you know what? Oh wait, we're on public.
Don't do
so
it.
I'm not gonna
Don't
do
do
it. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna broadcast it.
No,
y'all can look it up. It is on.
You got to look it up.
It's on the.
Shout out to the copywritten song. Oh, and since we're since you mentioned we're on public, I'm gonna do the cringe thing because I know it's not on our display right now because we're experimenting with different ways to broadcast. But if you like our show, we have other episodes on Patreon, patreon.com/subliminaljihad.
Hold up, I got you.
Up.
Actually, I got you. Where's the? We're going for it. Yeah, there you go. Now you can see it.
Can you?
At least it should. Yeah,
it's
counting
sure.
down. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I can't see it, and I don't know if I can see.
Oh, there it is. No, I see it on the screen. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We got lower thirds. Now it's gonna go away. So yeah, we do have a lot of episodes on Patreon. We're gonna be. Yeah, we'll probably talk about it. Maybe talk about it more on our Thursday show coming up. But we are moving into a new posting phase, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's going to be, we're putting out 2 episodes a week once again.
Yeah.
The way we started back, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
At least one will be a public live stream, and the other will be on Patreon.
Yeah, we finally, because we've embraced the live streaming thing, even though it makes things a little bit rockier at times, it does allow us to be consistent about putting out an episode a week. Because we record every week, but they wouldn't necessarily always drop every week.
Right.
Yeah,
it's just better that way, and it does save us some time. I think we might have, depending on the episode to episode, the Patreon episode might be live streaming on Patreon, but only ephemerally. So you have to catch it actually live as a, live experience.
Just how Patreon works,
yeah. Yeah. They put it away for a while, and then you can repost it. But then, probably edit more of those episodes, more of the deep research dives, a little bit, and then release the audio.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll get the video down. I'm working on the video intro. I think it's the first time it actually worked for people. I'm going to put some more, add more to the Mickey Mouse Aquino kind of tapestry there. I don't know if anybody's got ideas, or if you call it, tell me about sus imagery from any SJ episode to throw in there. Maybe it'll become kind of like an evolving quilt, like a patchwork jacket, as we go on, just add different images into it, I'm too afraid to change the actual audio of our intro itself, because it just it is what it is now. It would feel wrong. Do you agree?
Yeah.
It's it's special to me, but
yeah.
But yeah, we're trying on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we could probably wrap up.
Yeah,
there.
But we'll be back on Thursday for I think a significantly, well, I mean, not that the stream was short by any means, but we're gonna try to do a marathon type of thing. We're trying to make it festive and celebratory. And it will be. So please swing by.
Right. All day stream. We got to get that chat popping off. Gonna have a lot of cool old heads coming in to chat with us. So yeah, that's gonna be rad. I'm excited.
Yeah.
But for now, I guess that'll conclude Grotto Q&A 33. Maybe we'll,
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks
again to the Grotto.
Yeah, and thanks for all your questions. We'll get to them all eventually. Thank you for sending them and keep sending them. Yeah.
And we'll probably.
I mean, in this age of liveness, you'll be able to jump in and ask more topical questions at some point too. But
exactly.
We are going to answer the old ones.
Since I think we're probably, I forget if we're doing Monday or Thursday. It's going to be our sort of live every week.
It's
one of those
unsure.
days.
We're still
it's
not
unsure.
Yeah.
Maybe Thursday, because we're doing it both days this week. But maybe Thursday, I guess.
Yeah, it's been pretty hard for us to get into a structure, honestly. We're just but no, we'll figure it out. All right.
But I think that I think for the public one especially, we'll probably opt to do some live call-in, especially the new platform we're using has more interactive capabilities and shit like that. That maybe we could unlock to really reach a more coast to coast, call-in kind of vibe with all of y'all. So never fear if you've been waiting 3 years to have your answer in the Grotto of Truth. You can always call in and talk to us directly live. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there for now, but we will see you all on Thursday. Until then, dear listeners, stay vigilant.
Peace.